Welcome to the podcast series The New Student Pharmacist, where we discuss chemistry and pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy careers, community, and chemistry and pharmacy research. We encourage you to support the work we are doing and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts by subscribing for free. Note, the views on the podcast represent those of my guest and I.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
Buckle up. Today we're diving deep into proteins.
Those tiny but mighty molecules, they're the bedrock of life, you know.
Totally. And we're going beyond the basics today, talking about a Nobel Prize-winning discovery. This is set to completely change medicine as we know it, and so much more.
It's huge. This year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry. All about revolutionizing how we understand proteins. We're not just looking at them under a microscope anymore. We're designing them, predicting their every move with this, incredible accuracy.
Okay, so to break this down, we've got our hands on some exciting stuff. Excerpts from the actual Nobel Prize announcement, some really cool research on proteins and how they relate to neurodegenerative diseases.
Oh, and we've even got insights from a leading scientist in the field.
Exactly. Ready to get your mind blown.
Let's do this.
All right, so 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. It went to three incredible minds: David Baker, Demis Hassabis, and John Jumper. And their work, all about solving a challenge that's been puzzling scientists for ages: protein folding.
Okay, picture this. Proteins are like microscopic origami. They start as chains of amino acids. Think of them like beads on a string. But the thing is, these chains, they don't stay straight. They fold and they twist into these incredibly complex 3D shapes. And get this, those shapes, they determine what the protein actually does.
So proteins are like these tiny, perfectly folded machines. I think I'm getting it. But why is it so important to figure out how they fold? Why not just, let them do their thing?
You'd think it'd be that easy, right? But that's where it gets really wild. Each protein, it could theoretically fold into an almost impossible number of shapes. It's a number so huge, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
Oh, hold on. Information overload. Give me an idea. How many potential shapes are we talking about here? Say, for a smallish protein.
Okay, imagine a protein with just 100 amino acids. That's tiny in the protein world. This little guy could potentially fold into 147 different shapes. To put that into perspective, if this protein tried on a new shape every single second, it would take longer than the entire age of the universe to try them all.
Mind-blowing, right?
That's what's known as Levinthal's paradox.
Okay, my brain hurts just trying to imagine that. So, how in the world do scientists even begin to untangle how a protein folds with so many possibilities? It's like finding a specific grain of sand in the Sahara Desert.
Well, back in the 70s, there was this scientist, Christian Anfinsen. He made a huge breakthrough. He discovered that a protein's amino acid sequence, that string of beads we talked about, it actually holds the instructions for how it'll fold. It's like a secret code hidden within the protein itself.
So if we know the amino acid sequence, we should be able to, predict the shape, crack the code?
That was the idea. And early on, that's exactly what scientists tried to do. They used their knowledge about the different amino acids, their properties, and tried to come up with some basic rules for predicting how the protein would fold.
So like if you see amino acid A next to amino acid B, boom, you know it'll fold a specific way.
Exactly. Those early attempts were a good starting point. But there was a problem. They could only predict tiny bits of the protein structure, not the whole intricate 3D shape.
Okay, so like they could maybe figure out a spiral staircase in our protein mansion, but not the whole floor plan.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And if you're missing that complete picture, you can't fully grasp how that protein works, how it interacts with other molecules in the body. And that's where things get really interesting with David Baker and his research into computational protein design.
Let's dive into that. How did Baker change the game?
Well, instead of just using those simple rules, he brought in the big guns, computers. His team created this groundbreaking software called Rosetta. It was a total game changer.
Rosetta, like the Rosetta Stone that helped us understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Exactly. Just like the Rosetta Stone unlocked the secrets of those ancient writings, Baker's software opened up this whole new world of protein understanding. Rosetta uses these sophisticated algorithms, basically like a superpowered puzzle solver, to piece together protein structures.
So it's like having this giant library of protein building blocks, and Rosetta can just like try out different combinations, see what fits until it finds the most stable structure.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really mind-blowing. Baker and his team didn't stop at just predicting existing structures. They actually designed a protein completely from scratch, a brand new structure, something never seen in nature before.
Hold on, they created a protein that had never existed. That's amazing. Tell me more.
It was called Top 7, and let me tell you, it turned heads. This breakthrough back in 2003 showed that we weren't stuck just copying nature anymore. We could design proteins to do specific things, and that opened up a whole universe of possibilities.
Okay, so we've gone from understanding how proteins fold to basically creating them on demand. This is where those real-world applications start to come in, right?
Yeah.
What can we actually do with this?
The possibilities are, well, almost limitless. Imagine designing proteins to deliver drugs with pinpoint accuracy, or creating brand new therapies for diseases we thought were untreatable. We could even develop entirely new types of biomaterials.
This is starting to sound like something out of a sci-fi movie. But we've got to talk about the other half of this Nobel Prize, predicting protein structures using artificial intelligence. And that's exactly what we'll do right after this quick break. So we've talked about how scientists, like David Baker, are actually building new proteins from the ground up. But this Nobel Prize, it also recognized this other groundbreaking achievement, predicting protein structure. It's like we're deciphering the language of life itself, you know? Where do we even start?
Right. We touched on how those early attempts at predicting structure, they had their limits. It's like those scientists only had a few pieces of a massive puzzle.
Right.
And that's when they created this competition called CASP.
CASP.
Yeah, the Critical Assessment of Protein Structure Prediction. They wanted to shake things up, really push the field forward.
A competition, huh? So like the Olympics of protein prediction.
Exactly. Researchers from all over the world, they'd submit their predictions for how a specific protein would fold. And get this, they wouldn't even know the real structure beforehand. It was the ultimate test.
Okay, so how'd it go? Anyone crack the code?
For a long time.
Yeah.
Even the best predictions, they were only getting about 40% of the structure right. But then, something major changed the game. Artificial intelligence.
AI, how'd that get involved?
This is where our other Nobel Prize winners, Demis and John Jumper, they were DeepMind. They're known for being on the cutting edge of AI. And they developed this program, AlphaFold.
AlphaFold. Sounds intense. What made it so different?
Okay, imagine this. You're trying to teach a computer to recognize, like, different breeds of dogs. You show tons of pictures of dogs, right?
Yeah.
AlphaFold. It's kind of similar. These researchers, they trained it on this huge database of protein structures, let it learn all the patterns, the rules, all the things that govern how proteins fold.
So instead of having lines of code telling it how a protein should fold, it learned from actually seeing the data.
You got it. And that's where it gets really powerful. It can see these subtle connections, these relationships between amino acids that are really hard to capture with those more traditional methods.
Okay, so how'd it do in this CASP competition?
Well, the first version, AlphaFold 1. It was already a huge improvement. But then came AlphaFold 2.
AlphaFold 2.
And it just blew everything else out of the water.
What was different about AlphaFold 2?
It used this even more advanced type of AI. It was amazing at understanding these long-range interactions within the protein.
Long range.
Yeah, because sometimes you have amino acids that are far apart in the sequence, but they end up super close together in that final folded structure.
So it's like it can see those connections across the entire protein, not just what's right next to each other.
Exactly, and the results,
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
AlphaFold 2 was as accurate as experimental methods, the kind that take tons of work in the lab.
Wow. So are you saying that instead of months or even years of research, you could potentially predict a protein structure in like a few hours, maybe even less, using AlphaFold?
You got it. Complete game changer. And to make it even better, DeepMind, they made all of AlphaFold's predictions free for any researcher in the world to use.
Wow.
It's this massive database of protein structures. Like, imagine a Google Maps, but for the human body.
That's incredible. But earlier, you mentioned research on proteins and their link to neurodegenerative diseases. How does that all tie in?
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah.
It brings us to this molecule, cardiolipin, that hangs out in the mitochondria.
The powerhouses of our cells.
Exactly. And cardiolipin, it's crucial for those mitochondria to do their job. And some research suggests that when its structure gets messed up, it could be linked to diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Okay, so this is where it all comes together. Protein science and real-world health issues. How do we use all this new knowledge to actually develop new treatments?
The million-dollar question. And that's what makes this ability to design and understand proteins so precisely so exciting. Imagine designing a protein-based therapy that could zero in on damaged cardiolipin in the brain and fix it.
So like a microscopic repair crew.
Precisely. This is still a very active area of research. But the potential, it's huge. But of course, with this new power, we've got some new questions, new challenges to think about.
You're talking about the ethics of it all, right? If we can design and control proteins, where do we draw the line?
Exactly. And that's a conversation we definitely need to have.
So we've spent all this time talking about the incredible potential of designing and predicting proteins. But like any powerful new tool, we need to stop and think about the implications. It's like we've been given this amazing toolkit, and now it's up to us to figure out how to use it responsibly.
It really is like opening Pandora's box, isn't it? We've unlocked these amazing secrets about what makes life tick at its most basic level.
Okay.
But with that knowledge comes a huge responsibility.
So what are some of the concerns? What should we be keeping in mind as this technology keeps advancing?
Well, one big one is the potential for misuse, right? Someone could use this knowledge to design harmful proteins. Imagine a protein engineered to be toxic or to disrupt how our cells work.
Okay, yeah. That's a scary thought. Like something out of a sci-fi movie where a well-intentioned experiment goes totally off the rails. Are there other concerns too?
Absolutely. Even if everyone's intentions are good, we have to think about unintended consequences. We might design a protein to do a specific job, but it could have unexpected effects on other parts of the body.
So it's like introducing a new species into an ecosystem. You think it'll be good, but then you get these ripple effects that are impossible to predict.
Exactly. And we haven't even touched on the ethical dilemmas. What happens when we can design proteins that enhance what humans can do? Will everyone have access to those enhancements, or will it create a world where only the privileged benefit?
It's like those debates about gene editing, but taken to a whole other level. It sounds like we need to be having these discussions now before this technology gets even more advanced.
100% agree. We need everyone at the table. Ethicists, policymakers, the public. We've got to talk about this, make sure that we're using this technology ethically for the good of everyone.
And you mentioned a really promising approach that actually targets a specific protein in the mitochondria. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Definitely. We're talking about cardiolipin, right? That really important mitochondrial lipid that seems to be linked to neurodegenerative diseases when it's not working properly. Well, scientists are looking into these molecules called SS peptides, especially one called SS31, and they've been seeing some really promising effects.
Remind me, what's so important about cardiolipin again?
Remember, cardiolipin, it helps the mitochondria, those powerhouses in our cells, function the way they should. And SS31, it basically acts like a bodyguard for cardiolipin, protects it from damage.
So it's like a shield stopping those bad changes to the cardiolipin structure that we talked about.
Perfect way to put it. And when you protect cardiolipin, you help the mitochondria work better. And that could be huge for treating all kinds of diseases, including those neurodegenerative diseases we've been discussing.
That's incredible. So even while we're trying to figure out the ethical side of all of this, we're already seeing how it could lead to life-saving treatments. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. It shows you the immense power we're dealing with,
Yeah.
but also the huge responsibility that comes with these scientific discoveries.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what are the key things you want our listeners to remember?
Well, the biggest one is just how amazing this achievement is, the fact that we can design and predict proteins like this. We're not just watching the microscopic world anymore, we're actually shaping it. It's mind-blowing when you really think about it.
And it's opening up so many doors in medicine, biotechnology, you name it. But as we've been saying, that power comes with responsibility.
For sure. It's up to every single one of us to make sure that this technology is used ethically, that it makes the world a better place.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this. If we can design proteins with this kind of incredible precision now, what are the limits? Could we design proteins that do things we've never even imagined? The possibilities seem endless, and it's a future we're all a part of shaping.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's an exciting time to be following all of this, that's for sure. I can't wait to see what the future holds.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the incredible world of proteins. We hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned a thing or two along the way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
This time, we're kind of putting on our lab coats
Woo, okay.
and going head first into the intricate world of your own body.
Wow, that's quite a visual.
Right.
Patty.
So you've given us quite the medical mystery with this collection, actually.
Yeah.
We have a lecture on fluid and electrolyte imbalances
Okay.
and a conversation about pulmonary hypertension.
Interesting. So it's like you want to understand this whole symphony
Yes.
of systems that keep us going.
Yeah.
And then like zoom in
Yes.
on one particularly tricky instrument
Yes.
that can go out of tune.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling there are more connections between these two topics
Yeah,
than we might realize at first glance.
absolutely.
So to kick things off,
Yeah.
let's talk about the body's amazing balancing act,
Okay.
fluids and electrolytes.
Okay, yeah.
Our source material really gets into the weeds on this one,
Right.
particularly when it comes to sodium.
Yeah. Sodium often gets a bad rap
It does.
because of our dietary habits.
Right.
But it's actually crucial for keeping our cells functioning properly.
Right. It's not just about salty snacks.
Not at all.
It's playing this like behind the scenes role
Absolutely.
in how our bodies manage fluid.
Yeah, it's like the maestro
Yes.
of fluid balance.
And when those sodium levels get out of whack,
Right.
things can go south pretty quickly. Right?
Absolutely. One of the most common ways this plays out, at least in a clinical setting,
Yeah.
is with hyponatremia,
Okay.
which is essentially when your blood sodium levels are too low.
Okay.
Now, here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
There are different, almost like flavors of hyponatremia,
Oh, you got it.
each with its own set of causes and challenges.
In our source material, like I said, they really dug into these nuances.
Yeah, they do.
They even mentioned something called osmotic demyelination syndrome,
Oh, yeah.
which sounds a little terrifying, to be honest.
It is a serious condition,
Okay.
but thankfully a rare one.
Okay, good.
It really highlights how delicate this balance is, though.
Oh.
So imagine,
Okay.
have a patient
Mm-hmm.
who comes in severely dehydrated,
Okay.
sodium levels dangerously low.
Yeah.
It's tempting to want to correct that imbalance really quickly.
Right. You'd think so, right?
Yeah, you'd think, oh, let's just flood their system with electrolytes.
Get those levels back to normal ASE.
Right. But, and this is what's fascinating, the brain, particularly in cases of severe or prolonged hyponatremia,
Okay.
starts to adapt to that low sodium environment.
So it's like it's trying to make the best
Yeah.
of a bad situation.
Precisely. And if you correct the sodium levels too aggressively,
Oh, no.
too quickly, it can actually cause damage to brain cells,
Okay.
leading to that osmotic demyelination syndrome.
So slower is better in this case.
Yes.
A more gradual approach
More gradual.
to rebalancing those electrolytes.
Exactly. It's a great example of how even the most well-intentioned interventions can have unintended consequences if we don't consider the body's intricate adaptive mechanisms.
It's a good reminder that we're dealing with a complex system,
Absolutely.
not just isolated parts.
A beautiful orchestra.
Right,
That
exactly.
everything's in tune.
So we've talked about low sodium.
Yeah,
What about the flip side?
right.
What happens when sodium levels get too high?
That's called hypernatremia. And while less common than hyponatremia,
Okay.
it's just as important to understand.
Okay.
One of the most frequent culprits here is dehydration.
Right. Dehydration.
But it can also be a red flag for other conditions like diabetes insipidus.
Okay. Important to clarify here. We're not talking about, like, the diabetes.
Correct.
That involves blood sugar.
Exactly. Diabetes insipidus is a completely different condition.
Okay.
It affects the kidneys and their ability to conserve water. But both types of sodium imbalance, whether too high or too low,
Right.
underscore the importance of paying attention to those subtle signals
Yes.
our body sends us.
Right. Those early signs of trouble,
Yeah.
increased thirst, fatigue, confusion.
Exactly.
Those aren't things to ignore.
Absolutely. It's about listening to your body
Yes.
and recognizing when something's off.
Yeah.
And this is where that patient empowerment piece comes in.
Yes.
Knowing the basics, even just the terms hyponatremia, hypernatremia,
Right.
allows you to ask more informed questions.
Yes.
Advocate for yourself or your loved ones in a medical setting.
It's about being an active participant
Yes.
in your own health journey,
Exactly.
not just a passive bystander.
I love that.
Now, while sodium might be the star of the electrolyte show,
Right?
it's not a solo act, is it?
Not at all. We have a whole cast of supporting characters.
Oh, tell me more.
Potassium, calcium, magnesium,
Yep.
each playing a crucial role in this delicate balance.
Okay, so let's talk about those supporting players.
Yeah, let's do it.
What happens when their levels get out of whack?
Well, let's take potassium, for example.
Okay, potassium.
It's like the rhythm section of your heart.
Okay, yeah.
Too little potassium,
Uh-oh.
your heart might start skipping beats, literally.
Oh, wow.
Too much, you risk those beats becoming dangerously slow or irregular.
So potassium is all about that steady beat,
Yes.
that electrical impulse
Yes, exactly.
that keeps your heart ticking along.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then we have calcium,
Okay, calcium.
which is essential not just for strong bones,
Right.
but also for proper blood clotting and even nerve function.
Wait, blood clotting?
Yeah,
That's not something I would have connected to calcium.
it's true. Calcium is a crucial component of the coagulation cascade.
Okay.
Basically, that chain reaction that helps stop bleeding when you get a cut.
Fascinating. So if your calcium levels are too low, you might bruise more easily,
Exactly.
bleed more easily.
Exactly.
Okay.
And on the flip side, high calcium levels can lead to a whole other set of problems.
Oh, no. What happens then?
Kidney stones,
Oh,
bone pain,
yeah.
even confusion and fatigue.
It's like our bodies are constantly trying to find that sweet spot,
Yes.
that Goldilocks zone
Exactly.
for each of these electrolytes.
It's all about balance.
Right.
Yeah.
And when that balance is disrupted,
Yes.
it can have ripple effects throughout the body.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that brings us back to this idea of interconnectedness.
Right.
We've seen how electrolyte imbalances can impact everything,
Oh, yeah.
from brain function to heart rhythm to blood clotting.
Absolutely.
So if we think about our other topic,
Yeah.
pulmonary hypertension,
Mm-hmm.
which involves restricted blood flow in the lungs,
Right.
could there be a link?
Ooh.
Could these seemingly disparate systems actually influence each other?
That's a brilliant observation.
Really?
And you're right on the money.
Wow.
Yeah. It's fascinating, right?
Mm.
How these seemingly separate systems
Yeah,
can actually collide.
they do.
While our source material doesn't specifically detail a case
Okay.
where an electrolyte imbalance directly caused pulmonary hypertension,
Yeah.
it does highlight how those imbalances
Okay.
can exacerbate pH symptoms.
Oh.
Yeah.
So.
Well, think about it.
Okay.
Pulmonary hypertension
Yeah.
is all about restricted blood flow in the lungs,
Right.
putting extra strain on the heart.
Yeah.
Now imagine you throw an electrolyte imbalance into the mix,
Oh.
something that's also affecting heart rhythm
Yeah.
and fluid balance.
That's a recipe for trouble. It's
Exactly.
like adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. It's
Right.
a reminder that we can't treat the body in isolation.
Right.
Everything is interconnected.
Yeah. Which brings us to the heart of this deep dive. Understanding pulmonary hypertension.
Yeah.
We've talked about those narrowed pulmonary arteries.
Right.
But what's actually happening at the cellular level?
Oh, that's a great question. It's like the walls of those arteries
Co-
are undergoing this remodeling process,
Okay.
but not in a good way.
Uh-oh.
The cells lining the vessels,
Yeah.
the smooth muscle cells,
Yep.
they start to multiply and thicken.
Okay.
And the extracellular matrix, that scaffolding that holds everything together,
Yeah.
it gets kind of wonky.
So it's not just a simple plumbing problem.
No.
It's this whole cascade of cellular changes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the results,
Yeah.
those once smooth, flexible arteries
Yeah.
become stiff
Oh, no.
and narrow,
Oh, wow.
making it harder
Yeah.
and harder for the heart to push blood through to the lungs.
Talk about working overtime.
Exactly. And over time, that constant strain on the heart,
Yeah.
particularly the right side, which is responsible for pumping blood to the lungs.
It
Right?
can lead to right heart failure.
That sounds pretty serious.
It is. It's a major complication of pulmonary hypertension.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why early diagnosis and treatment are so crucial.
Speaking of diagnosis, our source material mentions a procedure
Yeah.
called right heart catheterization
Right?
as the gold standard for diagnosing pulmonary hypertension.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds pretty intense.
It might sound intimidating,
Okay.
but it's actually a relatively safe and straightforward procedure.
Okay, good.
And it provides invaluable information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Walk me through it. What's involved?
Sure. So they insert a thin, flexible tube, called a catheter,
Okay.
into a vein, typically in the neck or groin,
Mm-hmm.
and guide it through the circulatory system all the way to the heart.
So it's like a little explorer
Yes,
navigating your blood vessels.
exactly. And once it's in place,
Yeah.
they can measure pressures within the heart chambers
Okay.
and pulmonary arteries,
Okay.
giving them a precise picture.
Okay. Of what's going on with blood flow.
So it's not just a blood pressure cuff on your arm.
Right.
It's like getting a pressure reading directly from the source.
Precisely.
Wow.
And during the procedure, they can also do something called a vasoreactivity test,
Okay.
which helps determine how well your blood vessels respond to certain medications.
That's like a sneak peek
Yes,
into potential treatment options.
you got it.
Wow, that's amazing.
It helps tailor the treatment plan to each individual.
Okay.
Now, speaking of treatment,
Yes.
our source material mentions several medications
Okay.
used to manage pulmonary hypertension.
Yeah.
And you said earlier that even those could potentially be influenced by electrolyte imbalances.
That's right. We talked about how electrolytes can affect heart rhythm
Yeah.
in some of these pH medications,
Right.
particularly calcium channel blockers.
Yes.
Also work on those same channels, right?
You're catching on. That's exactly right. So you can imagine how an existing electrolyte imbalance.
Right. Might interfere with those medications
Okay.
or even amplify their effects.
So it's this delicate balancing act,
Yes.
managing both the pH
Right.
and those electrolyte levels
Yes.
to optimize treatment.
You got it. And that's why close monitoring, regular blood work,
Right.
those things are so crucial,
Yeah.
especially when someone's first starting on these medications.
It's about that ongoing communication
Yes,
between the patient and their healthcare team,
absolutely.
making sure everyone's on the same page.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's not just about medications either.
Okay.
Our source material highlights the importance of lifestyle modifications
Right.
as a cornerstone of pulmonary hypertension management.
Yeah.
And this is where those connections to overall health and well-being really come into play.
Right. We're not just talking about popping pills.
Exactly.
It's about making sustainable lifestyle changes that support the body's own healing mechanisms, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that includes everything from diet and exercise to stress management and sleep hygiene.
So let's unpack that a bit.
Okay.
What specific lifestyle recommendations stood out to you from our source material?
Well, when it comes to diet, there's no magic pH diet,
Okay.
but there are definitely some key things to keep in mind.
Okay.
First and foremost, managing sodium intake is crucial,
Okay.
especially for those also dealing with fluid retention.
Okay. So watching that salt shaker makes a difference.
It can, yes. And it's not just about table salt. It's
Yeah.
about being mindful of hidden sodium
Right.
in processed foods, restaurant meals,
Oh, yeah.
those sneaky culprits.
Right. Those nutritional labels can be eye-opening.
They can be. And beyond sodium, focusing on nutrient-dense foods.
Right.
Fruits, vegetables, whole grains.
Yeah.
That's key for supporting overall cardiovascular health.
Makes sense. A heart-healthy diet is going to benefit those pulmonary arteries, too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then there's exercise.
Right.
I know it can seem counterintuitive, especially when you're dealing with shortness of breath.
Right.
But regular physical activity can actually improve lung function
Oh, wow.
and strengthen the heart.
So it's not about running marathons.
Oh,
It's about finding what works for your body.
exactly.
Maybe starting with gentle walks
Right.
and gradually increasing intensity.
Precisely. And you'd be surprised by how even small amounts of movement can make a difference over time.
It's that whole motion is lotion philosophy.
I love that. And it's not just about the physical benefits either.
Right.
Exercise is a powerful stress reliever.
Right. Yeah.
And managing stress is crucial for anyone living with a chronic condition like pulmonary hypertension.
Stress can wreak havoc on your body.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And finding healthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Whether it's meditation, yoga, spending time in nature,
Yeah.
whatever brings you joy,
Yeah.
those are all crucial pieces of the puzzle.
It's about taking a holistic approach. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Recognizing that our physical and mental health are intertwined.
Exactly. And this is where that patient empowerment piece comes in again.
Right.
It's about taking ownership of your health journey,
Yeah.
working alongside your healthcare team to create a personalized plan
Yes.
that addresses your unique needs and goals.
And being an advocate for your own well-being.
Exactly.
Asking questions.
Yes.
Seeking out information.
Exactly. Because knowledge is power.
Oh, okay. So it's not as simple as kids being like little adults when it comes to pH.
Exactly. Yeah. For starters, the causes of pulmonary hypertension in children can be quite different.
Okay.
While some children might develop PH as a complication of other health issues like, congenital heart defects,
Yeah.
others might have what's called idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension, meaning we don't yet fully understand the cause.
Another idiopathic condition.
Right.
It seems like we encounter that term quite a bit in medicine.
It's true. It's true. Sometimes, despite our best efforts,
Right.
the underlying cause remains a mystery.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we're helpless. We have a growing toolkit
Okay.
of diagnostic and treatment options for pediatric PH, even when the root cause is unclear.
That's reassuring to hear.
Hmm.
So let's talk about those tools.
Okay, yeah.
What are some of the key differences in how we diagnose and manage pH in children?
Well, one of the biggest challenges with diagnosing PH in kids
Yeah.
is that the symptoms can be, quite subtle. And easily mistaken for other common childhood ailments.
Right.
Fatigue, shortness of breath, even just not wanting to play as actively as usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those could be red flags for a whole host of things.
Right. It's not always obvious.
Right.
When something more serious is going on.
Exactly. That's why that open line of communication between parents, caregivers, and healthcare providers is absolutely crucial.
Right.
Noticing those subtle changes, those deviations from a child's baseline,
Yeah.
those are often the first clues.
So it's about being attuned to those subtle signals.
Yes.
Trusting your gut as a parent.
Absolutely.
If you feel like something's not quite right.
Exactly. Yeah. And if those symptoms persist,
Yeah.
if a child isn't bouncing back as expected, that's when it's time to, dig a little deeper.
And what does that deeper dive involve? What do we have to do?
Well, many of the diagnostic tools we use for adults,
Okay.
like echocardiograms, right, heart catheterizations,
Yep.
are also used for children, but often with specialized equipment
Right.
and a more, kid-friendly approach.
Makes sense. Kids aren't just mini adults, right?
Mhm.
They need a different kind of care and communication.
Absolutely, and that goes for treatment too.
Yeah.
While some of the medications used for adults are also used in pediatric PH,
Okay.
dosages are often different,
Okay.
and we have to be extra vigilant about potential side effects,
Of course.
especially in, growing children.
Right. It's about finding that delicate balance
Right.
between effectively treating the condition
Yes,
and ensuring the child's long-term well-being.
precisely. And just like with adults, lifestyle modifications are a cornerstone of pediatric pH management.
Okay.
But again, it's about tailoring those recommendations to a child's age, developmental stage, and overall health status.
So instead of like a strict diet, it's about making healthy eating fun and engaging.
Exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
It's about creating sustainable habits that become second nature, not just like temporary restrictions.
And what about exercise? I
Yeah,
imagine that can be really tricky,
it can.
especially with breathing difficulties.
It can be, but it's not about pushing kids beyond their limits.
Right.
It's about finding activities they enjoy, whether it's swimming, dancing, playing tag, anything that gets them moving and strengthens their heart and lungs.
It's about making it fun
Yes.
and engaging
Yeah.
so that it becomes a natural part of their lives.
Exactly. And, let's not forget the emotional and social aspects of living with a chronic condition like PH.
Yeah.
That's something that often gets overlooked.
Right.
But it's so important, especially for kids.
Absolutely. It's not just about treating the physical symptoms.
Right.
It's about supporting the whole child,
Yes.
their emotional well-being,
Yeah.
their social development, their overall quality of life.
You've hit the nail on the head. Support groups, therapy, open communication within the family, those are all crucial pieces of the puzzle.
It's about creating that safety net, that
Yeah.
support system that allows kids to thrive despite the challenges they're facing.
Beautifully said.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has. It has.
We've covered so much ground,
I know. Right.
from the delicate balance of fluids and electrolytes
Yeah.
to the complexities of pulmonary hypertension in both adults and children.
It's amazing how much we've unpacked. We've explored the science, the symptoms, the treatments.
Yes.
And, most importantly, the power of knowledge, awareness, and proactive care.
We've seen how seemingly unrelated systems can intersect,
It's true.
how even the smallest imbalances can have ripple effects
Absolutely.
throughout the body,
Yeah.
and how understanding those connections
Right.
can empower us to take charge of our health.
It's all about recognizing those patterns, connecting the dots,
Yeah.
and using that knowledge to make informed decisions about our well-being.
And remembering that we're not alone in this journey.
Absolutely not.
There are healthcare providers, researchers, entire communities
Yes.
dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of these conditions and improving the lives of those affected.
Absolutely. And with each passing day, we're getting closer
Yes.
to understanding the complexities of the human body
Yeah.
and developing new and innovative treatments.
That's an inspiring thought to end on.
It is.
So to our listener, we leave you with this: stay curious, stay informed, and never underestimate the power of your own voice in shaping your health journey.
And remember, even small steps taken consistently can lead to remarkable transformations.
From all of us here at The Deep Dive, thank you for joining us on this incredible exploration. Until next time, keep those brains engaged, keep asking those insightful questions, and keep diving deep into the wonders of your
into
own
a
health.
scientific breakthrough so big it just won the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. We're diving into the world of proteins.
Proteins are these tiny but really powerful molecules that basically make life work. And figuring out their structure, well, it used to feel like trying to solve a puzzle, but with billions of pieces.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Like, how can these long chains of molecules fold themselves into these super precise 3D shapes, each with its own special function? That's what scientists call the protein folding problem.
And it's not even just about watching them fold. Imagine if we could design completely new proteins with specific shapes for specific purposes. That's the exciting potential of computational protein design, and that's what we'll be diving into today.
This isn't just theory anymore. We're talking real-world stuff like new medicines, sustainable materials, even understanding how life itself began.
Exactly. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back. Imagine a protein, right, with just 100 amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. Each one can, twist and turn in tons of ways.
So we're not talking about a few possible shapes.
Not even close. The number's bigger than all the atoms in the universe. If a protein tried every single combination to find its right shape, it would take longer than the entire universe has existed. That's what's called Levinthal's paradox.
Wow, that's wild. So how did scientists even begin to tackle this problem that seems impossible?
That's where the ingenuity of computational protein design comes in. Instead of relying on chance, scientists started using computers to try to, simulate and predict how these complex molecules fold based on their amino acid sequences.
So it's like using a computer to solve that billion-piece puzzle you were talking about instead of doing it by hand.
Exactly. Early on, they focused on the basic rules of, how amino acids attract and repel each other. Some amino acids are hydrophobic, meaning they don't like water, while others are hydrophilic, they love water.
So it's kind of like designing a protein with a water-resistant inside and a water-loving outside, kind of like how oil separates from water.
Yeah, a great analogy. This simple idea led to the first steps in protein design. Back in 1988, scientists, Reagan and DeGrotto, they used this code of hydrophobic versus hydrophilic to actually design a protein that folded exactly how they predicted, a 4-helix bundle.
Wow, they designed a protein from scratch and it worked. That's groundbreaking.
It was huge. It proved that protein design wasn't just a fantasy, but designing something way more complex than a simple bundle, something with real-world uses, well, that was a challenge on a whole other level.
It's like comparing building a simple Lego tower to like recreating the entire city of New York. So how did they go from those early building blocks to designing way more complex proteins?
Well, this is where our first Nobel Prize winner, David Baker, comes in. He's the brains behind Rosetta, a revolutionary computer program that changed everything in protein design.
Rosetta. That name sounds super important in the science world.
It is. Just like the Rosetta Stone unlocked ancient Egyptian writing, Baker's program helped to unlock the secrets of protein folding. Instead of that simple code we talked about, Rosetta uses a more sophisticated approach called fragment assembly.
Fragment assembly. So it's less about building from scratch and more about like finding existing protein structures and piecing them together to make something new, like pre-made Lego sets.
You got it. Rosetta looks through this huge library of known protein pieces and then uses complex calculations like physics and thermodynamics to predict the most stable way to put them together.
So instead of just trying every single combination, Rosetta uses these calculations to make like smart guesses and then fine-tunes the design.
Exactly. And to test all the combinations to make sure they end up with the most stable protein structure, Rosetta uses something called Monte Carlo simulations.
Monte Carlo simulations? That sounds so complicated. What does that even mean?
So basically, it's like running a ton of virtual experiments, each one with tiny changes to the protein structure, and then they see which one works best.
So instead of just like shaking the protein around and hoping for the best, they're using these computer models to simulate how it would behave in real life.
Yeah, you can say that. It's way more efficient, way more accurate at predicting how a protein will fold and if it'll hold its shape to do what it's supposed to.
So Rosetta was a huge step forward, letting scientists design proteins that never even existed in nature. But how did they actually know these computer-designed proteins would fold up and work like they were supposed to?
That's where it got really exciting. In 2003, Baker's team designed this protein called Top7, a totally new protein structure never seen before in nature. And get this, when they actually made this protein in the lab, it folded exactly like Rosetta predicted.
No way! That's incredible. That's got to be like a legendary moment in science history. They proved you could design a protein from scratch just using computers. But what does that even mean for us? What can we do with this knowledge?
That's what's so cool about it. It opens up a ton of possibilities. For example, think about enzymes.
Enzymes. They're like nature's little helpers, right? They make chemical reactions go faster, kind of like those enzymes they put in laundry detergent to break down stains.
Right. But now, imagine enzymes that are designed to break down, like pollution in the environment, or maybe produce biofuels more efficiently, even create entirely new materials that we've never seen before.
So we could use the power of proteins to solve some of the world's biggest problems. That's amazing.
It is. And this isn't just, science fiction. David Baker's lab has been leading the way in enzyme design. Back in 2008, they published research showing they had designed brand new enzymes that could make reactions happen that no natural enzyme could do.
Wow, so they made enzymes that can do things nature hasn't even thought of yet. That's next level stuff.
It was a total game changer. And while those very first designer enzymes weren't quite as efficient as the ones found in nature, it proved it could be done. And just like with Rosetta, the designs can keep getting better and better over time.
But how do you even improve a designer enzyme? It's not like you can just change the code like you would with a computer program, right?
You're right, it's not that simple. But scientists have these incredible techniques now. One is called directed evolution.
Directed evolution. Wait, didn't a scientist win a Nobel Prize for that a few years ago?
They did. Frances Arnold won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry back in 2018 for her amazing work on directed evolution. Basically, it's like speeding up natural selection, but in a lab. You take a bunch of those designer enzymes, make some random mutations, and then you just pick the ones that do the job the best.
So you're basically guiding the evolution of the enzymes, making them better at doing what you want them to do. It's crazy how these scientific breakthroughs all build on top of each other.
It really shows how collaborative science is. Each discovery paves the way for the next. And speaking of breakthroughs, let's move from designing proteins to predicting their structure. This is where the work of our other Nobel Prize winners, Demis Hassabis and John Jumper, comes into play.
This is where AlphaFold comes in, right? I've heard a lot about AlphaFold. People say it's almost like magic how well it can predict protein structures. But how does it even work?
It's super interesting. AlphaFold, especially the newer version, AlphaFold 2, it uses this technology called the transformer architecture. That was inspired by AI used in image recognition, like the kind that can tell if there's a cat in a photo.
So instead of recognizing a cat, AlphaFold is trained to recognize the patterns in those amino acid sequences that tell the protein how to fold.
Exactly. They trained AlphaFold on this huge database of known protein structures so it could learn the rules, all the patterns, for how those amino acids interact.
So it's like giving AlphaFold this crash course on protein folding, showing it millions of examples until it develops an intuition for it.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And that intuition, it's incredibly powerful. Now we're talking about predicting protein structures with an accuracy of, get this, about 1 angstrom.
1 angstrom. That's ridiculously small, right?
It's about the size of an atom. That was a huge improvement in accuracy, as good as experimental methods, but way faster and without all the expensive equipment.
So AlphaFold basically put protein structure prediction into overdrive. It's like having this high-speed map of the whole protein universe. But with all this talk about designing enzymes and predicting structures, it's easy to get lost in the science. Let's bring it back down to earth. How are these protein folding breakthroughs already making a difference in the real world?
One of the most impactful things AlphaFold has done is create these databases of millions of predicted protein structures that are available for anyone to use. Remember how we talked about the protein data bank and how it only had thousands of structures because it was so hard to figure them out?
Yeah, and how much work and money it took to get each one.
Well, AlphaFold has totally changed the game. Now, we have this massive amount of structural data that scientists can use to study everything from how diseases work to possible drug targets.
So instead of trying to figure out one protein structure at a time, scientists have access to this giant library of structures. That's got to be a gold mine for medical research.
It is. It's speeding up research in so many ways. For instance, having all these protein structures means scientists can create more targeted therapies with fewer side effects. We're talking about designing drugs that fit perfectly with their protein targets, which makes them much more effective and reduces the chances of bad interactions.
That's awesome. And this ability to predict protein structures must be changing how we understand and treat diseases too, right?
For sure. A lot of diseases happen because a protein isn't working right. If we know the exact shape and structure of these proteins, we can design drugs or therapies that go right to the source and fix those malfunctions.
So it's like having a blueprint of the problem so you can develop much better solutions. That's personalized medicine on a whole other level.
Absolutely. And that leads us to one of the most exciting frontiers in medicine, personalized medicine, that's tailored to each person's unique DNA.
Personalized medicine tailored to your DNA, that sounds like something out of the future. Like, are we really getting close to that with all these advancements in, protein design and prediction? What could that look like?
Okay, so imagine this. You go to the doctor, right, and they take a little sample of your DNA. With that, your own genetic blueprint, they can actually predict, like, how likely you are to get certain diseases or even how you might react to certain medications, all based on the proteins your body makes.
So instead of everyone getting the same treatment, healthcare becomes, really personal, focusing on stopping diseases before they even happen and creating treatments that are just for you.
Exactly. Say, for example, you have a family history of a particular disease. With this tech, doctors could analyze your DNA and design a protein-based therapy that actually fixes the problem, like the protein malfunction that's causing the disease, and it could maybe even stop it before you even get sick.
That's incredible. It's like having these tiny little mechanics that can go in and fix things before they even break. I want to talk about something that's really interesting to me, like slowing down aging. People are saying protein design could be the key. Do you think that's really possible in our lifetime?
Well, aging is complicated, but a lot of researchers think that damage to our cells and our DNA is a big part of it. Now, imagine if we could design proteins that could repair that damage, maybe even reverse it.
So instead of just dealing with wrinkles and stuff, we could, tackle the root of the problem, the stuff happening inside our cells that makes us age.
Exactly. For example, scientists are looking at ways to design proteins that could remove those harmful molecules that build up in our cells over time, or even, make our own DNA repair systems work better.
It's like giving our bodies this cellular tune-up so our cells stay healthier, younger for longer. This is all super exciting, but I'm sure there's still challenges. Like, how do we go from all this amazing research to actual treatments that people can use?
You're right. It's still early days. We've got a long way to go before we can say for sure if these therapies will be safe and effective for everyone.
It's like we've got this amazing new toolbox, but we're still figuring out how to use all the tools. It reminds us that science takes time, right? And a lot of research and patience, too. But even with the challenges, the possibilities are just mind-blowing. We've covered so much in this deep dive, the basics of how proteins fold to designing new enzymes, even exploring the potential of personalized medicine.
And the most basic thing is that we're really just getting started with computational protein design. The more we learn about these amazing molecules, the more we'll be able to use them to make things better for everyone.
Yeah, it's really incredible to think about how much potential is packed into these tiny proteins. And it's so exciting to know that researchers are out there pushing the limits of what we thought was possible. Thanks so much for joining me on this incredible journey into the world of proteins. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly optimistic about the future, about how science can solve some of our biggest challenges.
I feel the same way. It's been great exploring all of this with you.
And to all our amazing listeners, thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed exploring these computational protein wonders with us. Until next time, keep those questions coming
Dive into
and
some,
never stop exploring.
well, pretty crucial stuff, how our bodies manage fluids and electrolytes. And let me tell you, after digging into this material, I realized it's way more interesting than it might sound at first.
Yeah, most people, they hear electrolytes and think, sports drinks after a workout, right? But it goes way deeper than that.
Oh, for sure. It's not just about replacing what you sweat out. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, can you give us a quick Electrolytes 101? Like, what are they exactly, and why should we care if ours are, as they say, a little wonky?
Okay, so think of it this way. Electrolytes are kind of like the behind-the-scenes crew for, well, pretty much every major function in your body. You got sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, all these players working together to keep things running smoothly.
Right, like a well-oiled machine. And from that lecture you shared, I learned that sodium's a big deal outside our cells, while potassium's mostly inside, right?
Exactly. Sodium, it's like the bouncer for your cells, controlling how much water they hold on to. Too little, and your cells get all bloated. Too much, and they shrivel up like a raisin. Neither one's a good look.
So, like, if you're severely dehydrated, that throws your sodium levels out of whack.
Big time. And we're not just talking about forgetting your water bottle on a hot day. Certain meds, like diuretics, they can also deplete sodium.
Which would make sense because they're often prescribed for high blood pressure, and you mentioned sodium plays a role in that, right?
Yeah.
How do diuretics even work?
Basically, they're like those friends who encourage you to let go of things you don't need. Diuretics tell your kidneys to ditch more sodium through your pee, and that excess sodium drags water along with it, lowering your blood volume and, as a result, your blood pressure.
Wow, so it's all connected. But that also explains why diuretics can mess with your electrolytes. You're flushing out more than just water.
Exactly. Now, on the other hand, we've got potassium. Think of it as the drummer keeping your heartbeat steady. It's the main electrolyte inside your cells, and it's crucial for all kinds of muscle contractions, including those that keep your heart ticking.
Okay, that makes the whole electrolyte imbalance thing way less mysterious.
Yeah.
It's literally like those crucial elements are off balance in our bodies, which then impacts all those other functions.
You got it. And the symptoms of an imbalance, well, they can be all over the map, depending on which electrolyte's off and how bad it is.
So, say my potassium's out of whack. What kind of symptoms should have me picking up the phone to call my doctor? Besides, obviously, an irregular heartbeat.
Good question. So you might feel completely wiped out, weak, or even get muscle cramps. In really bad cases, it can even cause tingling or numbness in your hands and feet.
Wow, so even small changes in these electrolytes can throw off your whole system. That's kind of wild.
It is, and it just goes to show how important it is to be aware of these potential imbalances, especially if you're dealing with other health conditions.
Right, awareness is key. So we've covered why electrolytes matter and how they can get out of balance. But what about fixing the problem? Is it as easy as taking a pill, or is it more complicated?
It really depends, to be honest. Sometimes something as simple as tweaking your diet or drinking more water can do the trick. But in other cases, especially if it's more serious, you might need IV fluids.
Like a direct hit of electrolytes straight into the bloodstream.
Exactly. And sometimes, if medications are the culprit, your doctor might adjust your dosage or look at other options. The key is to figure out what's causing the imbalance and treat that, not just the symptoms.
Okay, so we've explored electrolytes. Now let's shift gears to a different kind of pressure issue, pulmonary hypertension. That conversation you shared about it really got me thinking about this other type of high blood pressure.
Yeah, it's a good point. Not all high blood pressure is the same. We're talking about two different beasts here. Systemic high blood pressure, that's the one everyone usually thinks of, affecting arteries throughout your body. But pulmonary hypertension, PH for short, that one sets up shop in the arteries of your lungs.
And we're not talking about, like, feeling a little breathless after climbing a flight of stairs, right? This is something more intense.
Right on. Think back to that highway analogy from the conversation we discussed. Your lung arteries, those are the highways for your blood cells, carrying them to pick up oxygen. But with pH, it's like a traffic jam on those highways. The walls of those arteries, they get thicker and stiffer, squeezing down on the blood flow and making your heart work way harder to push blood through.
So instead of a clear path, it's like the blood's hitting all this resistance and your heart's putting in overtime just to keep things moving. What does that do to your body over time?
Well, all that strain on your heart, it can eventually lead to something called right heart failure.
Right heart failure. That sounds pretty serious. What does that actually mean?
So your heart's divided into two sides, right? The right side, its job is to pump blood to your lungs. But with right heart failure, that right side gets weaker and can't keep up. That can lead to fluid building up in your legs and ankles, even your abdomen.
Yikes. Definitely not something to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the warning signs someone might experience that would make them think, hey, maybe I should get checked out for pH?
That's the tricky part. See, those early symptoms of pH, they can be sneaky, easy to brush off, especially if you're not usually that active. We're talking things like shortness of breath when you exert yourself, feeling tired, maybe a little weak. It's easy to just chalk it up to being out of shape or, just getting older.
Easy to miss those early signs.
Yeah.
What about as it progresses? Do the symptoms become more obvious?
Yeah, as pH progresses, that shortness of breath, it can get worse. Even when you're just relaxing, you might feel dizzy or lightheaded, maybe even faint. And because that right side of your heart's struggling, you might notice swelling in your legs and ankles. Some folks even experience chest pain, especially during physical activity.
Okay, those are some red flags you definitely don't want to ignore.
Yeah.
So say someone's having those symptoms, goes to the doctor suspecting pH, what's next?
Well, a doctor, they'll probably start with a physical exam, listen to your heart and lungs, ask about your medical history, that kind of thing. But to really know for sure if it's pH, they'll need to do some tests. The gold standard is something called a right heart catheterization.
Right heart catheterization.
Mhm.
I remember that term from the conversation. Sounds a little intimidating, to be honest.
The name sounds scarier than it actually is. It's a minimally invasive procedure. They insert a thin, flexible tube, called a catheter, into a vein, usually in your neck or groin.
So no open heart surgery or anything like that?
No, nothing like that. They carefully guide the catheter through your veins all the way to the right side of your heart and then into the pulmonary arteries.
So it's like a tiny explorer mapping out your blood vessels.
That's a great way to put it. And by doing that, doctors can directly measure the pressure inside your heart and those lung arteries, giving them key information that other tests can't.
So the right heart catheterization gives us a diagnosis.
Then what?
Is there like a magic pill for pH? Or is treatment more involved?
Yeah, it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation. Treating pH, it's all about figuring out what works best for each person, finding the right combination of therapies to tackle their unique challenges, kind of like putting together a puzzle,
Okay, I like that analogy. So what are the different pieces of this treatment puzzle?
Well, medications, they're a big one. They're like the foundation. They work in different ways to help blood flow more easily and take some of the burden off the heart.
Can you give us some examples? What are these medications actually doing in the body?
Sure. One class of drugs, they're called endothelin receptor antagonists. It's a mouthful, I know. But basically, they block a substance in your body that makes blood vessels tighten up. So by blocking that substance, these medications help the blood vessels in your lungs relax and open up, giving that blood more room to flow through.
So it's like they're taking the brakes off those constricted blood vessels.
Exactly. Another important group is called PDE5 inhibitors. You might recognize some of these medications, like sildenafil and tadalafil.
Wait, those names ring a bell. Don't they have another use?
They do, yeah. But when it comes to pH, they work in a similar way to those endothelin receptor antagonists we talked about, helping those blood vessels in the lungs relax and widen.
It's amazing how a single medication can have different uses depending on what you're trying to treat. So doctors have a whole toolbox of medications to choose from when treating pH.
Exactly. And they often use a combination, tailoring the treatment plan to each patient, how severe their pH is, that sort of thing.
That makes sense. It's not just about masking symptoms. It's about addressing the root cause. But medication isn't the whole story, is it? What about lifestyle changes? How big of a role do those play in managing pH?
You're absolutely right. Medications, they're essential, but they're only part of the picture. It's like building a house. Medications are the foundation, but you need the rest of the structure to make it a home. That's where lifestyle comes in.
I like that. So what are some of the key lifestyle changes that can really make a difference for someone living with PH?
Well, exercise is huge.
Yeah.
And before you picture yourself running marathons, remember, it's all about finding what you enjoy and what works for your body.
Right. No need to become an Olympian overnight.
Exactly. Even gentle activities like walking, yoga, swimming, those can do wonders for your heart and lungs. And don't forget, exercise isn't just about physical fitness. It can really boost your mood, help you manage stress, and improve your sleep. And all of those things, they're so important when you're dealing with a chronic condition like PH.
All connected, right? Mind and body. What about diet? Is there a specific PH diet people should be following?
You know, there's no magic bullet when it comes to diet, but focusing on nutrient-rich foods is key. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, those provide the building blocks your body needs to thrive. And just as important is limiting the processed foods, sugary drinks, unhealthy fats. Those can actually make inflammation worse, which can then make PH symptoms worse.
Gotcha. So it's about making sustainable, healthy choices, not about depriving yourself or going on some crazy restrictive diet. What about hydration? I'm guessing that's super important too.
Absolutely. Drinking enough water, that's crucial for everyone, but it's especially important if you have PH. Water helps to thin out your blood a bit, making it a little easier for your heart to pump.
It's like lending your circulatory system a helping hand. We've talked about exercise, diet, hydration. What about stress? I imagine managing that plays a big role as well.
You're right on the money. Stress can really make PH symptoms worse, so finding healthy ways to manage it is key. Things like mindfulness, meditation, deep breathing, even just getting out in nature or listening to calming music, those can make a world of difference.
And we can't forget the power of connection, right?
Yeah.
Having a good support system is so crucial.
Absolutely. Talking to loved ones, a therapist, or joining a support group, those can provide invaluable support and remind you that you're not alone in this.
So it's really a holistic approach, looking at the whole picture, mind, body, and that social support system. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the most important takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
You know, when it comes to PH, knowledge is power. With the right information and the right support, you can navigate this condition and live a full and meaningful life. Don't be afraid to ask questions, advocate for yourself, and remember, you are not defined by this diagnosis.
That's such an important message. And for our listeners, this is just the beginning. Keep learning, keep asking those questions, and remember, you've got this.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and
Welcome to the podcast series, The New Student Pharmacist, where we discuss chemistry and pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy careers, community, and chemistry and pharmacy research. We encourage you to support the work we are doing and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts by subscribing for free. Note, the views on the podcast represent those of my guest and I.
Okay, so fluids and electrolytes: water, sodium, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium. Note this recording was adapted from the work of Dr. Muhammad, Professor I had at Howard. So some objectives: we want to discuss the normal fluid and electrolyte distribution into the body's intracellular and extracellular compartments. We want to calculate and interpret plasma osmolarity based on serum, sodium, glucose, and BUN. You want to describe the role of arginine, vasopressin in maintaining plasma osmolality. We want to discuss potential causes of hyponatremia, hypernatremia, hypokalemia, hyperkalemia. Hypomagnesemia, hypermagnesemia, hypocalcemia, hypercalcemia, hypophosphatemia, hyperphosphatemia. Also want to be able to list the common signs and symptoms of hyponatremia, hypernatremia, hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, hypomagnesemia, hypermagnesemia, hypocalcemia, hypercalcemia, hypophosphatemia, hyperphosphatemia. You want to be able to formulate pharmacologic plans for patients with clinically significant hyponatremia, hypernatremia, hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, hypomagnesemia, hypermagnesemia, hypocalcemia, hypercalcemia, hypophosphatemia, and hyperphosphatemia. The total body water comprises 45 to 80% of body weight, depending on sex and age. Total body water is distributed primarily into two compartments: intracellular fluid, ICF, and extracellular fluid, ECF. ECF is intravascular fluid, plasma/serum, and cellular ECF is intravascular fluid, plasma/serum, or interstitial fluid. Total body water is 0.5 to 0.6 liters per kilogram. Intracellular fluid, 2/3 of total body water. Extracellular fluid, 1/3 of total body water. Intravascular fluid is 1/4 of extracellular fluid. And interstitial fluid is 3/4 of extracellular fluid. Separated intravascular and interstitial are separated by capillary membranes. Overview of fluid balance. Fluid distribution between intracellular and extracellular spaces is determined by osmotic pressure. Effective osmoles are solutes that cannot freely cross cell membranes and determine osmotic pressure. ECF, sodium holds water in the extracellular space. Chloride, proteins, glucose, medications. ICF, potassium holds water within the cells. Proteins. And the activity of cellular sodium-potassium ATPase pump allows for maintenance of solute compositions in ECF and ICF and regulation of cell volume. So types of IV fluids: you have crystalloids, solutions of ions that can cross the semipermeable capillary membrane. Examples of 0.9% sodium chloride, otherwise known as normal saline, activated ringer, dextrose 5% in water, D5W. Also have colloids, suspensions of molecules that cannot cross semipermeable capillary membrane due to the molecular weight of the molecules. They remain in the intravascular space longer, may seem better than crystalloids based on distribution properties. No evidence to demonstrate improved outcomes. These are higher costs. Examples include aluminum, heterstarch, and dextrin. Distribution of IV fluids. So crystalloids have your normal saline or lactated ringer. Sodium and chloride do not freely enter cells but evenly distribute in extracellular space. Each liter provides 250 mL into intravascular space. D5W, dextrose is metabolized to H2O and CO2. Water crosses any membrane. Each liter provides 100 ml into intravascular space. Colloid is too large to cross capillary membrane. Albumin 5%, 100 ml. Infused provides 100 ml intravascular volume replacement. So, quick snapshot in terms of tonicity. The dextrose 5% in water is hypotonic. 0.45% normal saline, hypotonic. Activated ringer is isotonic. 0.9% NaCl on normal saline is isotonic, and 3% NaCl is hypertonic. Fluid resuscitation. Intravascular fluid depletion is common due to hypovolemic or septic shock. Need prompt intravascular fluid replacement. Goal is to restore intravascular volume and prevent organ hypoperfusion. Normal saline or lactated ringer are recommended. Crystalloids preferred due to the decreased cost and no proven clinical benefit of colloids. Chloride-rich versus chloride-poor solutions. Hypochloremic, metabolic, acidosis. BA is a 54-year-old male presenting in the emergency department with hypotension, 88 over 58 millimeters mercury, tachycardia, heart rate of 110 beats per minute, glucocytosis 18.6 times 10 to the 3 per microliter, fever 101.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Blood cultures times 2 balls are set for gram-negative, are positive for gram-negative rods. The emergency department physician asks you to select the liter of fluid for fluid resuscitation. Which one of the following fluids is the most appropriate for BA? The answer is normal saline. Osmolality is a measure of the osmoles of solute per kilogram of solvent, milliosmoles per kilogram, where osmolarity is a measure of osmoles of solute per liter solution, milliosmoles per liter. So serum osmolality can be measured by a formula that goes as such: 2 times the sodium amount plus glucose divided by 18 plus blood urea nitrogen divided by 2.8. So in brackets 2 times Na plus glucose divided by 18 in brackets plus BUN over 2.8. Serum osmolality. Normal serum osmolality 275 to 200 milliosmoles per kilogram. Sodium is the primary determinant of serum osmolality. Major changes in serum sodium can result in changes in serum osmolality. Changes in serum osmolality cause fluid shifts across cell membranes. Increased serum osmolality causes cellular dehydration. Decreased serum osmolality causes cellular swelling. Isotonic IV fluid, normal saline, no osmotic gradient, no fluid shift. Hypertonic IV fluid, 3% normal 3% NaCl solution, cell dehydration / shrinkage. Hypotonic IV fluid, 0.45% NaCl, RBC swelling, hemolysis, brain cell swelling, cerebral edema, herniation. Fluid homeostasis, arginine, vasopressin, ABP, as antidiuretic hormone. ABP results in water absorption, stimulates thirst, triggers the renal tubules to absorb water in distal implanting tubules. ABP release is stimulated by increased blood osmolality, decreased blood volume, decreased blood pressure, increased stress. Low plasma osmolality triggers a negative feedback that leads to less ABP release. So increased water intake, response to thirst, plus decreased water excretion. Kidneys response to arginine vasopressin equals decreased serum osmolality. Assessing fluid status, signs and symptoms. For hypovolemia, we're looking for tachycardia, hypotension, decreased urine output, increased ratio of blood urea nitrogen to serum creatinine. We're looking for dry skin, dry mucous membranes, and weight loss. For hypervolemia, we're looking for jugular venous distension, weight gain, edema, decreased hemoglobin to hematocrit, decreased hemoglobin over hematocrit, so the quotient is decreased, and it's dilutional. Also looking for hypertension. Disorders of sodium balance, hyponatremia and hypernatremia. The normal serum range is 135 to 147 milliequivalents per liter. Major extracellular cation, primary determinant of plasma osmolality, and major osmotically active solute. Serum concentration tightly regulated so that serum osmolality can remain constant. Disorders in sodium homeostasis are related to total body water disturbances. Must take volume status into consideration. Hyponatremia and hypernatremia are common disorders in hospitalized patients. So hyponatremia, sodium is less than 135 milliequivalents per liter. Most common electrolyte abnormality in both adults and sodium. Drug-induced hyponatremia is common. People on thiazide diuretics and also on psychotropic medications. Significant morbidity/mortality, transient or permanent brain dysfunction, acute effects of hypoosmolality or too rapid correction of hypoosmolality. Hyponatremia evaluation. Determined type by serum osmolality. Normal, is approximately 280 milliosmoles. Isotonic hyponatremia. So pseudo-hyponatremia. High is greater than 280 milliosmoles. As hypertonic hyponatremia, usually due to hyperglycemia or other osmotically active substance. Low is greater than 280 milliosmoles. Hypotonic hyponatremia. Most common cause of hyponatremia, true hyponatremia. Further characterized by ECF volume status or extracellular fluid volume status, hypovolemia, euvolemia, or hypervolemia. Isotonic hyponatremia. Okay, so we're now talking about further characterized by ECF volume status, hypovolemia, euvolemia, or hypervolemia. Isotonic hyponatremia. Elevated serum lipids and proteins result in the movement of water from the ICF to the ECF to restore osmotic balance. Dilution of sodium in the sample lowers sodium concentration, no deficiency in total body stores. False hyponatremia. Artifact of method of some sodium cation measurement. Uncommon today with no methods of measurement. Total body water and sodium are unchanged. Hypertonic hyponatremia. Increased serum osmolality due to presence of excess non-sodium effective osmoles in the ECF. For example, mannitol or sorbitol. Commonly encountered in patients with significant hyperglycemia. Elevated glucose provides effective plasma osmoles. Fusion of water from ICF into the ECF, expansion of ECF volume and decrease in sodium serum concentrations. For every 100 mg per deciliter increase in glucose, serum sodium decreases by 1.6 milliequivalents per liter. Corrected serum sodium equals measured sodium plus 0.016 times serum glucose minus 100, where serum glucose minus 100 is a bracket. Total body water and sodium cation are unchanged. Hypotonic hyponatremia, most common and has many potential causes. Assess the ECF volume in 3 categories. Decreased ECF volume, hypovolemic, normal ECF volume, euvolemic, increased ECF volume, hypervolemic. Appropriate treatment depends on accurately identifying cause. So characteristics of hypotonic hyponatremic states. So characteristics we'll be discussing will be water and sodium, the causes, effect on total body water, effect on total body sodium, clinical presentation, and treatment. So for hypovolemic hyponatremia, sodium loss is much greater than water loss. Causes involve renal, so thiazide diuretics, and non-renal diarrhea, cerebral salt wasting. It results in a decrease or reduction in reductive or decreased effect on total body water, with decreases on total body sodium. The clinical presentation shows up as orthostasis, hypotension, tachycardia, dry mucous membranes, and CNS changes. Treatment involves normal saline until vital signs are stable, maintenance fluids to continue, fluid deficit replacement, sodium replacement of cerebral salt wasting, and VRAs are contraindicated. So for euvolemic, isovolemic hyponatremia, water gain only is caused to be syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormones, SIADH, polydipsia, very thirsty, and excess free water intake. Those are some of the causes. Effect on total body water, increase. Effect on total body sodium, looks like it's equilibrium. Depends on severity. The clinical presentation depends on severity of hyponatremia. It can present as seizures or lethargy. The treatment involves water restriction, emeclocycline, loop diuretics, and valproate. Okay, so for hypervolemic hyponatremia, water gain is greater than sodium gain. Causes can be heart failure, liver cirrhosis, kidney failure, nephrotic syndrome. Effect on total body water, increase. Effect on total body sodium, increase. Clinical presentation, peripheral and pulmonary edema, variable blood pressure, treatment, sodium restriction, water restriction, loop diuretics, valproate. So hypovolemic, so that's referring to the ECF. Hypotonic is referring to the serum molarity, and hyponatremia is referring to the iron concentrations. Hypovolemic, you have decrease in your volume of ECF. Hypotonic, you have less than 280 milliosmoles. Hyponatremia, you have less than 135 milliequivalents per liter. So this occurs due to fluid loss. Patients with fluid loss may become transiently hypernatremic, may be caused by diarrhea, excessive sweating, and diuretics. Total body water and sodium are decreased. Transient hypertonic state leads to osmotic ABP, so hydrogen vasopressin release, burst response. The patient drinks water, hypotonic or given IV hypotonic fluids, water retention, and hyponatremia. So euvolemic, so you have the correct, a good normal volume, ECF, euvolemic, hypotonic, so the serum osmolarity is still less than 280. Milliosmoles and hyponatremia is less. Hyponatremia serum sodium ion concentration is less than 135 milliequivalents per liter. Normal or slightly decreased ECF sodium content and increased total body water ECF volume, so water intake greater than output. Volume increase is typically not significant enough to cause edema or signs of volume overload. Patient looks euvolemic. Most commonly caused by syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone, SIADH. So syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone, water intake exceeds renal excretion due to increased non-osmotic release of AVP or enhanced renal sensitivity to AVP. Most common causes of SIADH: tumors, CNS disorders, pulmonary disease, drugs. Examples include carbamazepine, lamotrigine, cyclophosphamide, SSRIs, TCAs, and ecstasy. Hypervolemic hypotonic hypernatremia occurs in conditions where both sodium and water excretion are impaired: cirrhosis, heart failure, nephrotic syndrome. Expanded ECF volume and edema, decreased effective circulating volume, resulting in renal sodium retention and ECF volume expansion and edema. Concomitant non-osmotic AVP stimulation and water retention in excess of sodium retention. Total body water and sodium are increased. Hyponatremia, signs and symptoms. Primarily neurologic in nature. Presence and severity of symptoms depend on rate of onset and magnitude of abnormality. So let's look. Mild, moderate, and severe. So mild, 125 to 134. Mild hyponatremia, 125 to 134 milliequivalents per liter. Mild hyponatremia, 125 to 134 milliequivalents per liter. Symptoms often asymptomatic, associated with impairment of attention, posture, gait, increased fall risk, nausea, and malaise. Mild hyponatremia, 125 to 134 milliequivalents per liter for serum sodium. Symptoms often asymptomatic, associated with impairment of attention, posture, gait, increased fall risk, nausea, and malaise. Moderate hyponatremia, 115, 115 to 124 milliequivalents per liter. Presents as with symptoms of headache, lethargy, restlessness, altered mental status, and disorientation. Moderate hyponatremia, 115 to 124 milliequivalents per liter. Headache, lethargy, restlessness, altered mental status, disorientation. So severe hyponatremia. Severe hyponatremia, 110 to 114 milliequivalents per liter. Severe 110 to 114, moderate 115 to 124, mild 125 to 134. Severe is in the range from 110 to 114, moderate 125 to 124, mild 125 to 134. So for severe hyponatremia, you have symptoms of seizures, coma, respiratory arrest, brainstem herniation, or death. Hyponatremia treatment goals. Treat hyponatremia treatment goals. Treat underlying cause of sodium cation, volume imbalance. Correct hyponatremia safely. No more than 6 to 12 milliequivalents per liter at 24 hours. Hyponatremia general treatment approach. Treatment plan will depend on underlying cause and severity of symptoms. The initial treatment goal is to control severe symptoms. Appropriately balance the risk of hyponatremia versus the risk of osmotic demyelination syndrome. To appropriately balance the risk of hyponatremia versus the risk of osmotic demyelination syndrome. Osmotic demyelination syndrome, ODS, can occur with rapid correction of hyponatremia, acute decrease in brain cell volume. ODS, acute decrease in brain cell volume based on ODS, is paralysis. Patients with ODS may develop hyperreflexia, para/quadriparesis, Parkinsonism, pseudobulbar palsy, locked-in syndrome, or death in 1 to 7 days. Hyponatremia, treatment options. 3% NaCl reserved for severely symptomatic patients, seizures, delirium, coma, regardless of etiology. Normal saline, hypovolemic, hypotonic, hyponatremia. So low volume in NaCl, serum osmolarity, less than 280 milliosmoles. Hyponatremia, serum sodium cation concentration that's 135. So mild hyponatremia is 125 to 134. Moderate hyponatremia is 115 to 124. And severe is 110 to 140. Severe present simple seizures, coma, respiratory arrest, brain cell irradiation, and death. Moderate headache, lethargy, restlessness, alternate status, orientation, mild, often symptomatic, associated with impairment of attention. If you go from impairment of attention, mild, moderate, you have a headache, lethargy, restlessness, altered mental status, and severe, you have a seizures, coma, respiratory arrest, brain cell irradiation, and death. So fluid restriction, loop diuretic or plus or without loop diuretics, hypovolemic states, hypervolemic, so you have a high volume in the ECF, and that occurs with heart failure or cirrhosis. Euvolemic states, when you have syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone, polydipsia, you're very thirsty, and excess administration of hypotonic IV fluids. Don't quickly correct hyponatremia, because that can cause ODS, osmotic demyelination syndrome. So no more than 6 to 12 milliequivalents per liter in 24 hours. Survaptants, euvolemic hypotonic hyponatremia, SIADH, hypervolemic hypotonic hyponatremia, heart failure. The euvolemic hypotonic hyponatremia, you can use survaptants. Hypervolemic hypotonic hyponatremia, you can use survaptants. So for euvolemic and hypovolemic hypotonic hyponatremia, you can use survaptants. For hypovolemic hypotonic hyponatremia, you use normal saline. For euvolemic and hypervolemic hypotonic hyponatremia, you can use survaptants. For hypovolemic hypotonic hyponatremia, is normal saline. Demeclocycline, some patients with SADH is not controlled by water restriction alone. Demeclocycline, pharmacologic category, tetracycline antibiotic, cycline at the end. Mechanism of action, inhibits action of arginine vasopressin in patients with chronic syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone. SADH, increases free water excretion. Replacement therapy, SADH patients not adequately controlled by fluid restriction alone. Dosage 300 milligrams per mouth, 2 to 4 times daily. And that's off-label. Late onset of action, 3 to 6 days. No rule in acute management of severe hyponatremia. We know with severe hyponatremia, you'll have symptoms of seizures, respiratory arrest, brain cell irradiation, death, and that's referring to severe hyponatremia is referring to a serum sodium cation concentration of 110 to 140 milliequivalent per liter. Vasopressin receptor antagonists, valptins. Vasopressin receptor antagonists, valptins. Mechanism of action: promote excretion of free water without loss of serum electrolytes, resulting in net fluid loss. Increase urine output, decrease urine osmolality, and restoration of serum sodium levels. Indications: hypervolemic or euvolemic hyponatremia. Remember, for hypovolemic, hypotonic, hyponatremia, can use normoxidil as a treatment option. Okay, contraindications: hypovolemic, hyponatremia, anuria, concomitant use with strong CYP3A4 inhibitors. Sulfalvaptan, otherwise known as Samska, dosing 50 mg per ml daily. After at least 24 hours, you may titrate up to a max of 50 mg per day. You must start in hospital. Do not use for more than 30 days due to risk of hepatotoxicity. Don't use for more than 30 days due to risk of hepatotoxicity. That's referring to tolvaptan, Samska, and Vaptins are vasopressin receptor antagonists. Vaptins are vasopressin receptor antagonists. They're used for hypervolemic or euvolemic hyponatremia. Conivaptan, Prisol. Dosing is 3 mg IV and infused over 30 minutes at your loading dose. 20 mg IV, infusion over 24 hours. 0.83 mg per hour for 2 to 4 days. Do not use for more than 4 days. Okay, do not use hypertonic saline for chronic asymptomatic hyponatremia or hyponatremia secondary to diabetic ketoacidosis. If glucose is corrected, sodium will as well. Hyponatremia associated with congestive heart failure, usually chronic and asymptomatic. So do not use hypertonic saline for chronic asymptomatic hyponatremia. Hyponatremia secondary to diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not use hypertonic saline for hyponatremia secondary to diabetic ketoacidosis. As glucose is corrected, sodium will as well. Do not use hypertonic saline to hyponatremia associated with congestive heart failure, usually chronic and asymptomatic. Jay is a 60-year-old male admitted to the ICU with septic shock, gram-negative bacteremia, and SIADH. Serum sodium steadily decreased from 132 milliequivalents per liter, so he was originally in the mild hyponatremic range, and now it's at 110 milliequivalents per liter, so he's at severe hyponatremia. Past 2 days. He had a seizure today. Was administered lorazepam IV. The ICU team determined hyponatremia to be the cause of the seizure. Which of the following is the most appropriate treatment for today? So he has severe hyponatremia. Severe hyponatremia. IV 3% sodium chloride, so hypertonic chloride solution. 3% sodium chloride. Which of the following is not contraindication for tolvaptan? Hypokalemia is not a contraindication for tolvaptan. Vaptins are vasopressin receptor antagonists. Vaptins are vasopressin receptor antagonists. Okay, so let's talk about hypernatremia. Hypernatremia is when sodium is greater than 145 milliequivalents per liter. Always associated with hypertonicity and increased serum osmolality, due to water deficit relative to sodium in extracellular fluid, often due to impaired thirst response on those who don't have access to water, inability to replete water deficit. Young infants and children mechanically ventilated or comatose, patients, elderly, disabled. High mortality rate. Clinical outcomes depend on how severely rapidly hypernatremia develops. Hypernatremia pathophys. most often results from water loss by either renal or extrarenal mechanisms. Most often results from water loss by either renal or extrarenal mechanisms. It can result from hypertonic or isotonic fluid administration or excess sodium ingestion. It can also be caused by diabetes insipidus. Patients excrete large volumes, 3 to 20 liters per day of diluted urine. Central DI, so central diabetes insipidus, due to decreased RGD vasopressin secretion, or nephrogenic DI, decreased kidney response to RGD vasopressin. Let's talk about hypernatremia. Characteristics we'll be discussing will be water and sodium, the causes of these different types of hypernatremia, the effect on total body water, the effect on total body sodium, clinical presentation, and the treatment. So hypovolemic hypernatremia. Water loss is much greater than sodium loss. Renal causes that are renal are osmotic diuresis, diarrhea use, post-operative diuresis, and high output acute tubular necrosis. One more time, the causes of hypovolemic hypernatremia: renal, osmotic diuresis, diuretic use, post-operative diuresis, high output acute tubular necrosis. The effect on total body water: decrease. Effect on total body sodium: decrease. Clinical presentation: orthostasis, hypotension, tachycardia, dry mucous membranes. Treatment involves 0.9% NaCl until vital signs stable and free water replacement. So for euvolemic or isovolemic hypernatremia, water loss only, causes can be congenital or acquired diabetes insipidus, nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, or primary polydipsia. The effect on total body water: decrease. The effect on total body sodium: equilibrium. Depends on severity of hypernatremia. So our clinical presentation depends on severity of hypernatremia. It can present as seizures or lethargy. Treatment is free water replacement, arginine vasopressin, or an arginine vasopressin analog. So hypervolemic hypernatremia. Sodium gain is greater than water gain. Causes can be sodium overload, example 3% sodium chloride, sodium bicarbonate, salt tablets, concentrated tube feedings, hypertonic dialysate, or sodium-containing medications. The effect on total body water: increase. Effect on sodium: increase. Peripheral and pulmonary edema. This is how hypervolemic hypernatremia presents: peripheral and pulmonary edema, variable blood pressure. Treatment: free water replacement with loop diuretic. Require hemodialysis to remove volume. So hypovolemic hypernatremia: renal, adrenal, GI, lung, skin. The loss of water and sodium, so water loss is greater than sodium loss, results in hypovolemic hypernatremia. So it's referring to the extracellular fluid having a decrease in the volume of the extracellular fluid, hypovolemic. And hypernatremia is referring to a milliequivalent per liter sodium cation serum sodium cation concentration of 145 milliequivalents per liter. Euvolemic hypernatremia: DI, skin loss, iatrogenic excess, adverse drugs, and osmotic diuresis. Lots of free water, and you have the euvolemic hypernatremia, so greater than 145 milliequivalents per liter. Diabetes insipidus. These are a few select causes: central DI, familial, unreplaced insensible losses, hypodipsia, organic. Nephrogenic, familial, hypercalcemia, chronic, hypokalemia, kidney disease, drug-induced lithium, most common, phoscarnet, clozapine, amphotericin B, tenofovir, dimethylcycline, didanosine, ifosfamide. Hypervolemic hypernatremia, sodium overload, neurocorticoid excess, gain of water, and sodium gain is greater than water gain. Hypervolemic hypernatremia. Hypernatremia signs and symptoms: mild, moderate, and severe. Mild, lethargy, weakness, confusion, restlessness, irritability. Moderate, twitching. Severe, seizures, coma, death. Usually requires acute increase in sodium, 160 milligrams per liter. Serum sodium is greater than 180 milligrams per liter, millimoles per liter. Associated with high mortality. Hypernatremia treatment goals and principles: correct sodium to 145 to 150 milligrams per liter. Rapid correction of serum sodium can result in movement of excess water into brain cells, edema, seizures, neurologic damage, death. Normalize ECM volume, resolve symptoms. Hypovolemic hypernatremia. Treatment and monitoring. Treat initially with 0.9% NaCl until hemodynamically stable. Initial infusion rate adults equals 200 to 300 milliliters per hour or higher. Children equals 10 to 20 milliliters per kilogram per hour. Once intravascular volume is restored, 0.45% sodium chloride, dextrose 5% in water, or another hypotonic fluid can be used to correct the water deficit. Monitor serum sodium cation volume status every 2 to 3 hours during the first 24 hours. Adjust the hypotonic fluid infusion rate accordingly. So for euvolemic hypernatremia, central DI, treatment and monitoring, use AVP replacement therapy with desmopressin, ED-AVP, and AVP analog, and increases water reabsorption. May be given by mouth. IV subcutaneous SL IN. Change bioavailability will change in route. PO has poor bioavailability. Intranasal, so IN is intranasal. Preferred 10 micrograms intranasal once daily, titrate to 20 micrograms twice a day based on serum sodium cation concentration. Duration of action 7 to 9 hours. Adverse reactions: water retention, intoxication, hyponatremia, hypervolemia. Monitor serum sodium cation concentration at 24 hours and every 3 to 4 days during the initial dosage titration period, then every 2 to 4 months. Euvolemic hyponatremia, euvolemic hypernatremia, nephrogenic DI, treatment and monitoring. So euvolemic hypernatremia, we talked about central DI, you treat it with desmopressin and AVP analog. Can be given PO, IN, IV, SQ, or SL. Adverse reactions include water retention, intoxication, hyponatremia, or hypervolemia. Monitor serum sodium cation concentration 24 hours and every 3 to 4 days during the initial dosage titration period, and then every 2 to 4 months. So euvolemic hypernatremia, nephrogenic DI, monitoring. Stop potential contributing drugs. So stop potential contributing drugs. Correct concomitant electrolyte disturbances. Administer hypotonic fluids. Indomethacin 50 milligrams oral 3 times daily. Potentiates AVP activity, so arginine vasopressin activity. Alternative therapy with medications having antidiuretic properties. Diabetes insipidus treatment options. You can use desmopressin acetate, central and nephrogenic DI, 5 to 20 micrograms intranasally every 12 to 24 hours. Chlorpropamide, central, 125 to 250 milligrams. Or you can just 125 to 250 milligrams orally daily. Carbamazepine central 100 to 300 milligrams orally twice daily. Glucophage central 500 milligrams orally 4 times daily. hydroperoxides are central and nephrogenic. 25 milligrams orally every 12 to 24 hours. Amiloride. Nephrogenic. 50 milligrams orally daily. 10 orally daily. Amiloride accumulated nephrogenic 5 to 10 milligrams orally daily. Nomacin central and nephrogenic 50 milligrams orally every 8 to 12 hours. Hypovolemic hyponatremia. Hypovolemic hypernatremia. Hypervolemic hypernatremia. Treatment and monitoring. Administration of D5W plus the diuretic to facilitate excretion of excess sodium cation. Furosemide 20 to 40 milligrams IV every 6 hours. Continue until signs of reach falling overload, pulmonary congestion, edema, dogs. Monitoring serum cation initially every 3 to 4 hours, then every 6 to 12 hours. Sodium concentration is less than 140 milliequivalents per liter. Results of potassium balance, hypokalemia and hyperkalemia. Okay, so potassium. Normal serum concentration range for potassium is 3.5 to 5 milliequivalents per liter. It's a major intracellular cation. Sodium potassium adenosine triphosphate. Pump in cell membrane contains intracellular stores of potassium. Transport sodium out of the cell, potassium into the cell, a ratio of 3. Correction. Transport sodium out of the cell and potassium into the cell at a ratio of 3 to 2. Transport sodium out of the cell and potassium into the cell at a ratio of 3 to 2. Okay, potassium homeostasis, dietary intake, GI and urinary excretion, hormones, insulin, aldosterone, catecholamines, and acid-base balance. Potassium homeostasis, dietary intake and GI and urinary excretion. Dietary intake abundant in fruits, vegetables, meat, whole grains, and milk products. Most dietary potassium is absorbed with only 10 to 20 milliequivalents per day, limited in feces. GI and urinary excretion. Kidney is the primary route of potassium elimination. Potassium is freely filtered, almost all of it is reabsorbed, possibly the proximal tubule and the thick ascending loop of Henle. Potassium homeostasis, the hormones. Insulin, most important hormonal mediator, stimulates the cellular sodium potassium ATPase pump, thereby intracellularly shifting potassium. Tightly regulates serum potassium via a complex negative feedback loop. Serum potassium increases the pancreatic insulin secretion to prevent hyperkalemia. Aldosterone, secreted from the adrenal glands in response to high serum potassium concentration, promotes urinary potassium excretion. Catecholamines, usually epinephrine, result in intracellular movement of potassium by 2 mechanisms. Stimulation of beta receptors, which directly activates the sodium potassium ATPase pump. Glycogenolysis, which raises blood glucose concentration, thereby increasing insulin secretion. So potassium homeostasis, acid-base balance. Metabolic acidosis that results from increased serum metabolic acidosis, increased serum protons, or decreased serum potassium cations. Increased hydrogen cations or increased hydrogen cations leading to increased serum potassium ketone, which is going to be hyperkalemia, false hyperkalemia, not true excess of total body potassium. Metabolic alkalosis associated with hypokalemia, false hypokalemia, not true deficiency in total body potassium. Hypokalemia. Potassium is less than 3.5 milliequivalents per liter. Mild hypokalemia 3.1 to 3.5. Moderate hypokalemia 2.5 to 3. Severe hypokalemia less than 2.5. Mild hypokalemia 3.1 to 3.5 milliequivalents per liter. Moderate hypokalemia 2.5 to 3 milliequivalents per liter. Severe hypokalemia less than 2.5 milliequivalents per liter. Commonly encountered electrolyte abnormality in clinical practice. As many as 20% of hospitalized patients will develop hypokalemia. Workup should include comorbid disease states and medication history for non-existent healthy adults. So hypokalemia, total body potassium deficit, poor dietary intake, renal or GI loss, intracellular shifting, metabolic alkalosis, medications, variety of mechanisms, including transcellular potassium shifting and enhanced renal or stool losses, common drugs, diuretics. Hypomagnesemia present in 50% of patients with clinically significant hypokalemia. Reduces the intracellular potassium concentration and promotes renal potassium magnesium. Okay, drug-induced hypokalemia. Transcellular shift in the beta receptor agonist, epinephrine, albuterol, trimulene, formoterol, zimaterol, isoproterenol, ephedrine, cidofedrine, glucolytic agents, ritodrine, alidrine, also theophylline, levothyroxine, decongestant, caffeine, insulin, verapamil, and barium overdose. So, enhanced renal elimination, diuretics, acetazolamide, diazines, dapamide, metolazone, furosemide, pyrazinamide, metamide, bumetanide, endocrinic acid, high-dose penicillin, mineralocorticoids, miscellaneous aminoglycosides, amphotericin, cisplatin, non-fecal elimination, laxatives, sodium polystyrene, sodium sulfone, phenolphthalein, sorbitol, materium, sodium zirconium cyclosilicate. Hypokalemia, signs and symptoms. Mild, usually asymptomatic. Moderate, chronic weakness, malaise, myalgia. Severe, EKG changes. Electric arrhythmias, heart block, atrial flutter, ventricular fibrillation, cramping and impaired muscle contracting, can cause death from respiratory paralysis. Hypokalemia, treatment goals: prevent and/or treat serious life-threatening complications. Normalize serum concentration. Identify and correct underlying cause. Prevent overcorrection of serum potassium. So if you have 3.5 to 4 milliequivalents per liter, this is mild hypokalemia. Encourage dietary intake of potassium-rich food, no pharmacological therapy. So moderate hypokalemia, 3 to 3.4 milliequivalents per liter. Non-pharmacological therapy in asymptomatic patients, or potassium supplement in patients with conditions predisposing them to arrhythmia. Severe hypokalemia, less than 3 milliequivalents per liter. So always be treated to achieve levels of 4 to 4.5 milliequivalents per liter. Give oral potassium supplements to patients asymptomatic. Give IV potassium if patients symptomatic presenting with severe depletion of potassium less than 2.5 milliequivalents per liter, or cannot tolerate oral therapy. Clinical probes. Account for renal function when depleting potassium. Reduce potassium in patients with renal impairment / renal failure. Many institutions utilize potassium replacement protocol in ICU. Carefully review the patient's MAR to account for all potassium doses received by the patient. Supplemental potassium is a common cause of hypokalemia in hospitalized patients. Treat hypomagnesemia first. So hypokalemia non-pharmacological treatment. Things with high content potassium: kidney beans, lentils, soybeans, lima beans, pinto beans. Get your fishes: halibut, Pacific rockfish, Pacific cod, yellowfin tuna, rainbow trout, all cooked. We have upgraded milk, non-fat, low-fat, reduced fat, chocolate milk, skim milk, low-fat milk, buttermilk, orange juice, fresh, bananas, peaches, prunes, apricots, plantains, tomato sauce, pork. Very high content: potato, canned juice, prunes, carrots, tomato paste, tomato puree, beet, greens, white beans, plain yogurt, plums. Oral potassium, generally well absorbed. Take with food, and crush, chew, or cut, extended release tablet. Reverse effects, GI related. Potassium salts, potassium bicarbonate, concurrent conditions preferred, metabolic acidosis. Potassium phosphate, neutral phosphate, hypophosphatemia. So we're talking about potassium salts and the concurrent conditions preferred. So if you're given potassium bicarbonate, otherwise known as K-Vescent, concurrent conditions preferred, metabolic acidosis. Potassium phosphate, neutrophos K, concurrent conditions preferred, hypophosphatemia. Potassium chloride, K-diarrhea, K, most common for diuretic and diarrhea-induced hypokalemia. Most common causes of potassium depletion. Both conditions are associated with chloride losses. IV potassium, more dangerous than oral, so for phlebitis, hypokalemia, pain on injection site. Choose the right vehicle. Always prepare with saline solution, 0.9% or 0.45 NaCl. Don't use dextrose solution to stimulate insulin release and cause hypokalemia. Intermittent equivalent potassium in 100 ml sodium chloride, safe when infused to peripheral IV over 1 to 2 hours. EKG monitoring and infusion rates with 10 milliequivalents per hour. JB is a 60-year-old man hospitalized with COPD exacerbation. Labs revealed a serum potassium concentration of 2.1. So we know that 3.5 to 4 is mild, 3 to 3.4 is moderate, and less than 3 is severe. So he has severe hypokalemia. He is complaining of muscle pain, which is following the most frequent treatment for JB. Potassium chloride IV piggyback. It is recommended to divide the total daily dose of oral potassium supplements into smaller doses to help minimize which of the following adverse effects. GI upset. So hyperkalemia. Potassium is greater than 5 milliequivalents per liter. Mild hyperkalemia, 5.1 to 5.9 milliequivalents per liter. Moderate hyperkalemia, 6 to 7 milliequivalents per liter. Severe hyperkalemia, greater than 7 milliequivalents per liter. Many cases in hospitalized patients are the result of overcorrection of hypokalemia with IV potassium. Occurs more commonly in elderly patients with impaired renal function, receiving chronic by mouth supplementation, chronic oral supplementation. Hyperkalemia, etiology and pathophysiology. Increased intake of food supplements or salt substitutes. Generally stage 4 or 5 chronic kidney disease and dialysis patients, non-compliant with dietary potassium restriction. Decreased excretion. Kidneys excrete 9% of daily potassium intake. Endocrinologic disorders, including adrenal insufficiency, Addison's disease, selective hypoaldosteronism. Less or decreased aldosterone production leads to potassium hypertension. Drug-induced, typically dose-dependent. Tubular unresponsiveness to aldosterone. Anemia, systemic lupus erythematosus, SLE, amyloidosis. Defect in renal tubular potassium secretion. Distribution of potassium into the extracellular space. Efflux of potassium from within the cell into the ECM. No change in total body potassium. Metabolic acidosis, cellular damage, rhabdomyolysis, trauma, burns, tumor-lysis syndrome. Drug-induced hyperkalemia. Drug classes: ACEs, ACE inhibitors, benzopyrrole, captopril, enalapril, lisinopril. So CELB, captopril, enalapril, lisinopril, benzopyrrole. So your ARBs: candesartan, irbesartan, olmesartan, losartan, valsartan. So VIOCL, valsartan, irbesartan, olmesartan, candesartan, losartan. Direct binding inhibitors: aliskiren, vasospasm diuretics, amiloride, pyranose, spironolactone, tram3. Prostaglandin inhibitors: the NSAIDs, miscellaneous plasma salts, example penicillin G, digoxin, cyclosporin, tacrolimus, permethoprim, sulfamethoxazole, heparin. So hyperkalemia signs and symptoms: frequently asymptomatic, heart palpitation, skipped beats, muscle weakness, bradycardia. Motility changes: peak T waves, widening PR interval, loss of P wave, widening PRS complex, ventricular tachycardia. Organized adverse cardiac effects. This is hyperkalemia treatment goals. Reverse signs and symptoms are present. Return the serum and total body stores of potassium to normal. So you want to antagonize adverse cardiac effects when reverse signs and symptoms are present. And you want to return the serum and total body stores of potassium to normal. So hyperkalemia treatment recommendations. Treatment depends on the severity of hyperkalemia, the rapidity of its development, and the patient's clinical condition. Asymptomatic to mild 5.1 to 5.9 usually requires dietary modification and daily monitoring for inpatient and weekly for outpatient. Moderate 6 to 6.9 as well as grade 7. Hyperkalemia, accompanied by clinical symptoms or EKG changes, requires immediate treatment. So hyperkalemia treatment recommendations. So for severe hyperkalemia, greater than 7 milliequivalents, or moderate 6.9 milliequivalent hyperkalemia. Antagonism of the cardiac membrane action of hyperkalemia, you can use IV calcium gluconate or IV calcium chloride. Decrease extracellular potassium, promoting its intracellular movement, and use insulin, glucose, beta-2 agonists, and sodium bicarbonate. For potassium excretion from the body, you can use dialysis, diuretics, or oral administration of cation exchange resins. Step 1. Stabilization of cardiac oxygen potential. IV calcium gluconate or IV calcium chloride stabilizes the myocardium, does not decrease potassium level. Dosing regimen 1 gram IV bolus administered over 5 to 10 minutes. Calcium chloride contains 3 times more calcium per gram than calcium gluconate, more effective. Calcium chloride can cause tissue necrosis if extravasation occurs. Hence, calcium gluconate is more commonly administered. Calcium chloride can cause tissue necrosis if extravasation occurs. Hence, calcium gluconate is more commonly administered. Repeat every 10 to 30 minutes a day. So, step 2, shifting potassium from extracellular to intracellular. You can use IV regular insulin, 5 to 10 units regular insulin, duration 2 to 6 hours. Give IV dextrose for e.g. less than 250 milligrams per dl. Sodium bicarbonate. useful in metabolic acidosis. 50 to 100 milliequivalents IV over 2 to 5 minutes. Raises serum pH and shifts potassium to ICS. Beta 2 agonists stimulate sodium potassium ATPase pump to promote intracellular potassium uptake and stimulate pancreatic beta receptors to increase insulin secretion. 10 to 20 nebulized over 10 minutes. Increasing potassium excretion. The dialysis, most rapid methods of lowering potassium levels, removal of potassium. Loop diuretic. Using normal renal function. Stage 3 or 4 CKD. Promotes urinary potassium excretion. Furosemide 20 to 40 milligrams IV every 4 to 6 hours. Exchanges, sodium polystyrene sulfonate. K-exylene, 15 to 60 grams per mouth or PR every 4 hours as needed. The mouth is more effective than the enema and is better tolerated by patients. Each gram of sodium polystyrene sulfonate exchanges 1 milliequivalent of sodium for 1 milliequivalent of potassium in the intestines. Contains a significant amount of sodium. Caution in heart or renal failure due to sodium retention. Separate from other oral medications by at least 3 hours, as it may bind to and increase the effectiveness of many oral medications. Contraindications include obstructive bowel disease. Hemodialysis is the main pivotal onset duration of action when it comes to treating hyperkalemia. It can be followed by furosemide, calcium, so several options. Be ranked as such: hemodialysis, furosemide, calcium, insulin, dextrose, sodium bicarbonate, albuterol, albuterol, sodium zirconium cyclosilicate, and patiromer. Okay, patient presents to the emergency department with a potassium level of 8 equivalents per liter, severe hyperkalemia. Study KD peak waves and wide PR interval. Which of the following is the immediate first-line treatment for this patient? Administer calcium gluconate 1 gram IV bolus over 5 minutes. Which of the following therapies does not increase potassium excretion? Calcium gluconate. Calcium gluconate is going to be used to stabilization of cardiac action potential. Insulin, bicarb, beta 2 agonists can be used to shift potassium from AC to IC. They increase the excretion of potassium, dialysis diuretic, and SPS resin. Polystyrene sulfonate. Okay, so magnesium function homeostasis. Normal serum range 1.4 to 1.8 equivalents per liter. It's a major intracellular cation. Function is important. It's an important cofactor in over 300 biochemical reactions in the body, especially with ATP. plays an important role in cellular functions, mitochondrial function, protein synthesis, cell membrane function, glucose metabolism, and parathyroid hormone secretion. Required for activity of the sodium-potassium ATPase pump. Homeostasis depends on the balance between intake and output. Hypomagnesemia, etiology. Magnesium is less than 1.4 milligrams per liter. Common in ambulatory and hospitalized patients. Up to 65% of ICU and 20% of general medical patients have magnesium deficiency, usually associated with the drugs or conditions that interfere with intestinal absorption or increase renal excretion of magnesium. Causes of hypomagnesemia, TI. So you have reduced intake, protein calorie malnutrition, prolonged parenteral fluid administration, without magnesium, and also alcoholism. Reduced absorption, primary hypomagnesemia, malabsorption syndromes, short bowel syndrome, pancreatic insufficiency, proton pump inhibitors, long-term use. Increased loss, excessive vomiting, prolonged nasogastric suction, excessive laxative use, intestinal and biliary fistulas, prolonged diarrhea. Causes of hypomagnesemia, renal, primary tubular disorders, drug-induced renal losses, hormone-induced renal losses. So for your primary tubular disorders, you have primary renal magnesium wasting, Bartter syndrome, renal tubular acidosis, diuretic phase of acute tubular necrosis, post-obstructive diuresis, post-renal transplant diuresis, drug-induced renal losses, aminoglycosides, amphotericin B, cyclosporine, tacrolimus, diuretics, digitalis, pentamidine, and foscarnet. Hormone-induced renal losses, primary hyperparathyroidism, aldosteronism, hungry bone syndrome of the parathyroid gland. So causes of hypomagnesemia, internal redistribution and other. Internal redistribution, diabetic ketoacidosis, other excessive swelling and lactation. Internal redistribution, you got your glucose, amino acid, insulin administration. Other hypercalcemia and hypercalciuria. Internal redistribution, massive blood transfusion, rapid citrate. Other phosphate depletion. Internal redistribution, pancreatitis, lipedema. Other chronic alcoholism, ECL form expansion. So hypomagnesemia signs and symptoms. Neuromuscular, twitching, technique, generalized convulsion. Cardiovascular, heart palpitations, hypertension, arrhythmias, ventricular fibrillation, suicidal points, ECG abnormalities, and sudden cardiac death. One more time, cardiovascular, heart palpitations, hypertension, arrhythmias, ECG abnormalities, and sudden cardiac death. Electrolyte disturbances, hypokalemia, and hypocalcemia. Hypomagnesemia, treatment goals, resolution of signs and symptoms. Restore normal magnesium levels, correct concomitant electrolyte abnormalities, identify and correct underlying causes of magnesium depletion. Hypomagnesemia treatment. Magnesium supplementation can be given by mouth, intramuscular, or intravenous routes. By mouth is preferred. IM administration is painful, reserved for severe hypomagnesemia and limited IV access, and or IV bolus administration causes hypotension, flushing, and swelling. Administer slowly by infusion. There's no optimal regimen for replacement. Typically 8 to 12 grams total of magnesium sulfate. Divide doses in the first 24 hours, followed by 4 to 6 grams per day for 3 to 5 days. Thereafter to repeat by stores. 50% of administered doses are treated in urine. Multiple mg doses. Severe days, 35 days may be necessary. Hypomagnesemia treatment continues. So 1 to 4 millicurrents to 1 millicurrent per liter. So the oral supplementation preferred. Common adverse effect, diarrhea. Less than 1 millicurrent per liter or if signs and symptoms are present, regardless of serum magnesium. Magnesium sulfate IV, administered 4 to 6 grams in 50 to 100 milliliters in divided doses over 12 to 24 hours. Repeat as necessary to maintain concentration of 1 milligrams per deciliter. Typical dose 2 to 4 grams and 50 ml over 1 hour. You usually have to repeat for adequate completion. Extensive renal excretion. Reduced dose by 25% to 50% in patients with impaired renal function. Adverse reactions, hypotension, flushing, swelling, and vasodilation. Common oral magnesium products. Magnesium oxide, 242 milligrams in 400 milligram tablet. Magnesium hydroxide, 167 milligrams in 400 milligram tablet or 5 ml oral suspension. Magnesium chloride, 64 milligrams in each 535 milligram tablet. Magnesium citrate, 48 milligrams in each 5 milliliters of the oral solution. Magnesium gluconate, 27 milligrams in 500 milligram tablet. Magnesium lactate, 84 milligrams. Hypermagnesemia, greater than 1.8 milliequivalent per liter, occurs primarily in settings of renal insufficiency, CKD stage 4 or 5. Must increase magnesium intake, usually from vitamins. Magnesium excretion decreases as filtration rate declines. Causes of hypermagnesemia: decreased renal excretion, acute renal failure, or CKD with excessive intake, treatment of eclampsia and pregnancy, ureteral irritants, hemiacid, cathartics, other lithium therapy, hypothyroidism, milk alkali syndrome, Addison disease, and acute diabetic ketoacidosis. So hypermagnesemia signs and symptoms. Neuromuscular, lethargy, sedation, confusion, muscular weakness, paralysis, respiratory depression, cardiac dysrhythmias, hypertension, continuous vasodilation, heart block, and bradycardia. Hypermagnesemia treatment goals: reverse neuromuscular and cardiovascular complications, decrease magnesium concentration to avoid known values, identify and treat the underlying cause. Hypermagnesemia treatment mechanisms: reduce magnesium intake, enhance elimination, and antagonize the physiological effects of magnesium. Enhance elimination, force diuresis with 0.45 normothylene and loop diuretics to promote magnesium elimination. I.e. furosemide 40 mg IV. Reduces serum magnesium within 12 hours. Hemodialysis corrects hypermagnesemia within 4 hours. Reasonable option for patients who are already on hemodialysis. 3. Antagonize the physiological effects of magnesium. Calcium IV 100 mg to 200 mg elemental. Antagonizes neuromuscular and cardiovascular effects. 1 gram to 2 grams calcium gluconate IV. Transient effect, repeated doses may be needed hourly until the signs and symptoms improve and magnesium is normalized. Does not lower magnesium level. Dose of calcium bond. Hypocalcemia, hypercalcemia. Normal serum range for calcium, 8.6 to 10.2 milligrams per deciliter. Ionized, brackets free, unbound calcium, 4.5 to 5.2 milligrams per deciliter. Skeletal bone contains greater than 99% of total body calcium. Skeletal bone contains greater than 99% of total body calcium. ECF calcium is molecularly bound to plasma protein, 5%. Calcium regulation and homeostasis is important to function of cell membranes, propagation of neuromuscular activity, regulation of endocrine and excretory functions, blood coagulation cascade, platelet healing process, bone metabolism, muscle cell excitation, contraction, coupling, mediation of electrophysiologic slow channel response, and cardiac muscle. Calcium regulation and homeostasis. Ionized calcium concentration is closely regulated by the injections of parathyroid hormone, phosphorus, vitamin D, and calcitonin. PTH increases serum calcium concentration by stimulating calcium release from bone, increasing renal tubular reabsorption, enhancing absorption in the GI tract secondary to increased kidney production of 1,2,5-dihydroxyvitamin D3. Vitamin D directly increases serum calcium as well as phosphorus concentrations by increasing GI absorption. Indirectly, it can also lead to calcium release from the bone and reduce renal excretion. Calcitonin inhibits osteoclastic bone resorption. Calcitonin plasma concentrations are increased when ionized calcium concentrations are high, but the body attempts to return the serum calcium concentration to the range. Assessment of total serum calcium requires measuring serum albumin. Corrected serum calcium equals measured serum calcium in milligrams per deciliter plus 0.8 times, in brackets, 4 minus measured albumin. So measured serum calcium plus, in brackets, 0.8 times 4 minus measured albumin, in brackets. So hypocalcemia, less than 8.6 milligrams per deciliter, occurs infrequently in outpatient settings, occurs frequently in adult hospitalized patients, most common in elderly, malnourished, and patients receiving sodium phosphate bowel prep. Result of alterations in the effect of PTH and vitamin D on the bone and kidney. Primary causes of vitamin D deficiency and postoperative hypoparathyroidism. Other causes include critical illness, medications, hypoalbuminemia, blood transfusions, peripheral blood regenerative cell harvesting, and hemolysis syndrome. Hypocalcemia causes. Nutritional vitamin D deficiency is the most common cause of chronic hypocalcemia worldwide, less common in Western societies. Vitamin D is necessary for the optimal absorption. Vitamin D is necessary for the optimal absorption of calcium and phosphorus. It can occur secondary to chronic kidney disease if there is insufficient production of the 1-alpha hydroxylase enzyme, produce the 1,2,5-dihydroxyvitamin D3. Hypocalcemia causes. Surgery is the most common cause of chronic hypoparathyroidism. It can be caused by autoimmune disease, congenital defects, or iatrogenically. So thyroidectomy, radiation therapy damage. Chronic hypoparathyroidism persisting for more than 6 months may lead to hypocalcemia. Chronic hypocalcemia may ultimately present as visual impairment secondary to cataracts. Hypocalcemia causes hungry bone syndrome. Profound hypocalcemia, where bone rapidly incorporates calcium and phosphorus from the blood in an attempt to recalcify bone. Acute symptomatic fall in total serum calcium concentration to less than 7 milligrams per deciliter. Common in patients with a recent parathyroidectomy or thyroidectomy. Hypocalcemia causes. Hypomagnesemia of any cause can be associated with severe symptomatic hypocalcemia as unresponsive to calcium replacement therapy. Reduced serum magnesium concentrations can impair PTH secretion and induce resistance of target organs to the actions of PTH. Normalization of serum calcium concentrations in these patients is dependent on appropriate magnesium replacement. Hypocalcemia causes. During critical illness or post-operatively, hypocalcemia is common but usually mild. Hypothesized that cytokines impair PTH secretion, decrease production of 1,2,5-dihydroxyvitamin D3, and cause PTH resistance. Hypocalcemia causes drug-induced. You got your furosemide, calcitonin, bisphosphonates, oral phosphorus therapy, dosima, PEG bowel prep, phenobarbital, phenytoin, cincalcet, fluoride, ketoconazole, hamidine, and drugs that cause hypomagnesemia are also associated with the risk of hypocalcemia. So hypocalcemia signs and symptoms. You got your neuromuscular tetany, EP, extrapyramidal disorders, paresthesia, laryngeal spasm. Also CNS depression, anxiety, memory loss, confusion, hair loss, groove, brittle nails, eczema, EKG change, prolonged QT interval, arrhythmia, bradycardia, hypertension, unresponsive to fluid, vasopressor, administration. Hypocalcemia treatment rules: resolution of signs, symptoms, restore normal serum calcium levels, correct concomitant electrolyte abnormalities, identify and treat the underlying cause. For acute hypocalcemia, use IV calcium 1 gram to 3 grams over 10 to 30 minutes. That could be calcium chloride 1 gram IV, 37% elemental calcium to prevent tissue necrosis, administered via central venous access. Use calcium gluconate 2 to 3 grams, 9% elemental calcium, preferred for peripheral venous administration, less irritating to veins. Infuse naproxen 6 milligrams per minute. EKG monitoring recommended valued ionized calcium 10 to 12 hours after IV. Therapy: severe asymptomatic hypocalcemia. Adverse effects: bradycardia, AV block, hypertension. Bioavailability: do not add bicarbonate and phosphorus preparation. Chronic oral calcium and vitamin D supplementation. Starting dose 1 to 3 grams per day, elemental calcium. Average maintenance dose 2 to 8 grams per day, elemental calcium divided doses. Adverse effects: hypercalcemia, hypocalciuria. Oral calcium and vitamin D preps. Drug calcium carbonate 40% elemental calcium. Meals: calcium citrate may take without regard to meal. Vitamin D3 adequate daily intake 400 to 800 units per day, varies by age to achieve adequate intake. OTC: D2 capsule solution, prescription only. Hypercalcemia: etiology and epidemiology. Calcium greater than 10.2 milligrams per deciliter. Multiple causes of hypercalcemia, most commonly caused by cancer and hyperparathyroidism. Primary hyperparathyroidism occurs predominantly after age 50, affects women 3 to 4 times more than men. Accounts for the majority of cases in the outpatient setting. Cancer-associated hypercalcemia occurs in approximately 10 to 30% of patients with cancer at some time during the course of the disease, and is dependent on tumor type, predominantly occurring in hospitalized patients. Hypercalcemia causes: you can have neoplasms, bone metastasis, humoral-induced, medications, thiazides, lithium, vitamin D or vitamin A, calcium, aluminum, magnesium, antacids, calcium, aluminum, magnesium, antacids, theophylline, tamoxifen, ganciclovir, granulomatous disease, sarcoidosis, tuberculosis, cryptococcus, borreliosis, histoplasmosis, coccidioidomycosis, leprosy, American disease, adrenal insufficiency, hyperthyroidism, acromegaly. Hyperparathyroidism: primary, tertiary, miscellaneous, mobilization, Crohn's disease, familial hypocalciuric hypercalcemia. Adolescents and rapid adolescence. Hypercalcemia: increased bone resorption, increased GI absorption, or increased tubular resorption by the kidneys. Mild to moderate hypercalcemia, greater than 10.5, but less than 13, often asymptomatic. Severe hypercalcemia, greater than 13. Signs and symptoms involve anorexia, nausea, vomiting, constipation, polyuria, so peeing a lot, polydipsia, drinking a lot, nocturia. Hypercalcemic crisis, greater than 15, acute renal injury, obtundation, arrhythmia. If untreated, may progress to renal failure, coma, life-threatening ventricular arrhythmia. Chronic hypercalcemia, mastite calcification, hypercalciuria, chronic renal. Hypercalcemia treatment goals: reverse signs and symptoms, restore normal calcemia within hours to days, depending on severity, and correct or manage underlying cause. of hypercalcemia. For acute, induced by malignancy, may be treated with chemotherapy, such radiation, surgical or drug treatment of primary hyperparathyroidism, hypercalcemic crisis, acute symptomatic severe hypercalcemia are considered medical emergencies requiring immediate treatment. Chronic, usually caused by underlying medical condition or prescribed medication, may be resolved by treating underlying condition or withdrawing offending agent. For treatment options, you can use normal saline, monitoring and special population considerations, mental abnormalities, food overload, insufficiency, and congestive heart failure. Okay, starting dose 200 ml and time frame to initial response 24 to 48. You can also use calcitonin, myocalcin, 4 units. Monitoring and special population considerations involve phases of flushing, nausea, vomiting, allergic reactions, CI, in patients with allergy to calcitonin. Palmidronate or Aridia, zoldronate, corticoids, or diuretics. Calcitonin, myocalcin. Mechanism of action decreases calcium by inhibiting bone absorption. Useful in patients where saline hydration is contraindicated, for example, congestive heart failure, might lead to severely impaired renal function. Short-term therapy to reduce calcium from 24 to 48 hours. Effect can be transient. IV, subcut 40 units per kilogram every 12 hours. Adverse effects, allergic reactions, flushing, nausea, vomiting, tachyphylaxis. So bisphosphonate, mechanism of action, block bone resorption, inhibit osteoclasts. First line for hypercalcemia of malignancy, palmidronate and zoledrone acid. Slower onset of serum calcium concentration decline. Concentration begins to decline in 2 days and reach nadir 7 days. Calcitonin therapy or other interventions may be necessary if more rapid serum calcium reduction is needed. Dosing palmidronate, Aridia, 90 milligrams, IV infusion, rested of 2 to 24 hours. Zoledronic acid, class 4 to 8 milligrams, IV administered for 15 minutes. Bisphosphonates, adverse effects, fever, common, fatigue, osteonecrosis of the jaw. Zoledronic acid is associated with atrial fibrillation. Monitoring, you want to check your renal function. Therapy, nosumab, Fago. Mechanism of action, monoclonal antibody that inhibits the receptor. Activator of nuclear factor kappa light chain enhancer of activated T cells. Against RANKL, principal mediator of osteoclast survival. FDA approved for the treatment of hypercalcemia of malignancy refractory to IV bisphosphonate therapy. Corrected serum calcium remains greater than 12.5 milligrams per deciliter after more than 7 days of therapy. Dosing, 120 milligrams subcut every 4 weeks. Adverse effects, osteonecrosis of the jaw, hypocalcemia. Monitoring serum calcium in patients with reactive clearance less than 30 ml per minute. So corticosteroids reduce GI calcium absorption. Effective in treatment of hypercalcemia resulting from multiple myeloma, leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoidosis, hypervitaminosis A and D, and also prevent tachyphylaxis with calcitonin. Usual dose to prednisone or equivalent agent 40 milligrams to 60 milligrams daily. Advantages: relatively slow onset of action, and the potential for diabetes mellitus, osteoporosis, and increased susceptibility to infection. Calcinometic agent, calcin, sensipar. Mechanism of action: increases the sensitivity of the calcium sensing receptor on the parathyroid gland, results in reduced PTH and serum calcium. So dosing 30 milligrams per ml twice a day. Treated every 2 to 4 weeks in 30 milligram increments until the desired serum calcium concentration is achieved. Maximum approved dose 90 milligrams 3 times a day or 4 times a day. Adverse effects: hypocalcemia. Adverse effect: hypocalcemia. Disorders of phosphorus balance: hypophosphatemia and hyperphosphatemia. Normal serum range in adults: 0.7 to 4.5 milligrams per deciliter. Major intracellular anion: 85% of body stores found in bone. Typical Western diet provides a daily intake of 800 to 1,600 milligrams of phosphorus. 60% to 80% of oral intake is absorbed in the GI tract. Hypophosphatemia: phosphate less than 2.7 milligrams per deciliter. Mild to moderate: 1.5 to 2.7 milligrams per deciliter. Usually asymptomatic. Severe: less than 1.5 milligrams per deciliter. Observed in 1.1 to 3% of patients admitted to the hospital. Incidence in critically ill patients is 18 to 28%. Hypophosphatemia, pathophys: decreased GI absorption, reduced tubular reabsorption, or extracellular to intracellular redistribution. So conditions associated with hypophosphatemia develop: decreased GI absorption, phosphate binding drugs, sucralfate, calcium carbonate, aluminum / magnesium acids, sevelamer, lanthanum carbonate, decreased dietary phosphorus intake, coilocoids, vitamin D deficiency resistance, hypoparathyroidism, chronic diarrhea, steatorrhea, reduced tubular reabsorption, hyperparathyroidism, primary and secondary, elevated FGF23, recovery from burns, rickets, malignant neoplasms, Fanconi syndrome, acute volume expansion, metabolic acidosis, transplantation, vitamin D deficiency and resistance, diuretics, loop diuretics, thiazide diuretic, acetazolamide, osmotic agents, glucocorticoids, sodium bicarb, internal redistribution, feeding syndrome, parenteral nutrition, parathyroidectomy, hungry bone syndrome, alcoholism, respiratory alkalosis, diabetic ketoacidosis correction, dextrose solutions, insulin, catecholamines, anabolic steroids, glucagon, calcitonin, erythropoietin. Hypophosphatemia signs and symptoms: mild to moderate hypophosphatemia, usually asymptomatic. Severe hypophosphatemia, neurologic, anabolic encephalopathy, seizures, coma, cardiopulmonary, impaired myocardial contractility, respiratory failure, or congestive heart failure. Musculoskeletal, myalgia, bone pain, weakness, rhabdomyolysis, hematology, hemolysis, thrombocytopenia. Hypophosphatemia treatment goals: reverse signs and symptoms, normalize serum phosphorus concentrations, manage underlying conditions. Hypophosphatemia treatment approach: the acuity and other electrolyte conditions dictate the salt formulation and route of administration of phosphorus supplementation. Mild to moderate hypophosphatemia, 1.5 to 2.7 milligrams per deciliter, can be treated with oral phosphate salts. Osmotic diarrhea is a primary dose-limiting adverse effect. IV phosphorus supplementation in patients who are unable to receive oral supplements. Severe, less than 1.5 milligrams per deciliter, or symptomatic hypophosphatemia, IV phosphorus supplementation. Mild hypophosphatemia, 2.3 to 2.7 milligrams per deciliter. If unable to receive oral supplementation, IV phosphorus we're talking about. Dose 0.08 to 0.16 millimoles per kilogram. Moderate hypophosphatemia, 1.5 to 2.2 milligrams per deciliter. They can't receive our supplementation. Dose 0.16 to 0.32 millimoles per kilogram. Patient with impaired kidney function to receive reduced doses, typically less than or equal to 50% of the initial empiric dose. Carefully monitor serum phosphate due to predisposition to phosphate retention. Severe less than 1.5 milligram per deciliter, or symptomatic hypophosphatemia. Dose 0.32 to 0.64 millimoles per kilogram. Normal renal function. Dosage and infusion recommendation, as well as response to IV phosphate replacement, are highly variable. CB is a 54-year-old female presented to the emergency department hospital with respiratory distress and weakness. The lab reveals potassium 5.8, sodium 139, magnesium 1.9, phosphate 1.4, serum creatinine 1. Metformin is the best treatment for CB's hypophosphatemia. Sodium phosphate IV. So maximum rate of infusion for IV phosphorus 7.5 millimoles per hour. Pick potassium or sodium salts for IV phosphorus based on the other electrolyte values. Concomitant hypokalemia, choose potassium phosphate. 1 millimole potassium phosphate. Potassium. If potassium is greater than 4, choose sodium phosphate, 1 millimole sodium phosphate. Hyperphosphatemia. Phosphate greater than 4.5 milligrams per deciliter. Margin severe greater than 6.5 milligrams per deciliter. Severe greater than 7. Most common causes CKD, so chronic kidney disease, or acute kidney injury, or intracellular phosphate release. Tumor lysis syndrome, complication of chemotherapy. Massive lysis of cells and release of intracellular contents. Pathophys for hyperphosphatemia. Reduced renal tubular resorption of phosphate, excessive exogenous phosphate loads, tissue catabolism, rhabdomyolysis, and acid base disorders. Signs and symptoms of hyperphosphatemia: acute GI disturbances, the obstruction of the urinary tract, and rarely seizures, chronic red eye and pruritus or itchy skin. Signs: the elevated calcium phosphate product results in precipitation in arteries, joints, soft tissues, and the viscera. Can result in tissue necrosis, calciphylaxis, or calcemic uremic arterial. Hyperphosphatemia. Avoid GI and neurologic symptoms. Prevent deposition in urinary tract. Return serum phosphate concentration to normal or nano. Hyperphosphatemia treatment. Severe symptomatic, manifesting with hypocalcemia and tetany, calcium. Non-emergent phosphate binding therapy. Divalent and trivalent cations containing calcium, lanthanum, magnesium, iron, aluminum. Valamer, administered 2 times a day with meals. Avoid long-term treatment with aluminum hydroxide and aluminum carbonate, as they have been associated with anemia, CNS disorders, and bone disease. That's the end.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
Thanks for listening to the podcast series The New Student Pharmacist, where we discuss chemistry and pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy careers, community, and chemistry and pharmacy research. We encourage you to support the work we are doing and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts by subscribing for free. We are so glad that you were able to tune in today. Note, the views on the podcast represent those of my guests. And I take care.
We're diving into pulmonary hypertension today, specifically PAH. You know, most people have heard of high blood pressure, but not everyone realizes it can actually happen in your lungs too.
Yeah.
That's where things get really interesting and complicated. You've given me quite the medical school lecture on this, so let's try to unpack it. What exactly are we talking about when we say pulmonary hypertension, focusing on PAH?
So we're talking about high blood pressure, but in the arteries of your lungs specifically, not the rest of your body. And you see, these arteries are responsible for a really crucial task, which is carrying blood from your heart to your lungs to be able to pick up oxygen.
Okay.
So imagine them like highways for your blood cells.
Okay, so if they're like highways, what happens in PAH? Is it like a traffic jam?
Exactly. So in PAH, those highway walls, so the artery walls, they thicken and they stiffen.
Okay.
It's like slowly squeezing a hose so the flow gets restricted. This makes the heart work a lot harder to push the blood through.
Oh, wow.
And over time, that extra effort leads to, problems like right heart failure.
And this isn't like some rare disease.
Right. It's less common than some people think. There are about 5 to 50 cases per million adults.
Wow.
But still, that's, a significant impact for those living with it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about symptoms then. How would someone even know if they had this? Because it's not like you can just use a regular blood pressure cuff, right?
You're right. A regular cuff is not going to cut it here. PAH is tricky because those early symptoms, like shortness of breath, maybe when you're exercising or even just like climbing the stairs, can be mistaken as just being out of shape.
Right.
You might also experience fatigue, weakness, even chest pain.
Right.
All things that could point to other issues as well.
So it's like a little bit of a medical mystery then.
Yeah.
So how do you actually diagnose this? What's the key to cracking the case?
You need to see what's happening directly inside the heart and those pulmonary arteries. And that's where a procedure called right heart catheterization comes in. It's the gold standard for diagnosis.
Okay, so walk me through this. What is this procedure? What does it actually involve?
Okay, so imagine like a tiny submarine navigating your arteries.
Okay.
Giving doctors like a live feed of what's happening inside.
I see.
That's essentially what a right heart catheterization does. It directly measures the pressure within your heart and pulmonary arteries. It gives a really clear picture of how restricted those blood vessels are. And they can also do something called a vasoreactivity test.
Hold on, a vasoreactivity? Wow.
I know it sounds
That sounds intense.
it sounds more complex than it is. Basically, doctors administer medication and closely observe how your pulmonary arteries react. It's like a sneak peek into how your body responds to, say, calcium channel blockers.
Okay.
So it helps determine if your blood vessels are likely to just relax and open up with certain drugs.
So it's kind of like a crystal ball for treatment. Like
Yep.
it gives them clues as to what might work well for you.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Only about 5% of patients have a positive response to this test.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what happens to the 95% then? What are their options?
That's where treatment starts to get even more interesting.
Yeah.
We're talking about the world of personalized medicine. So for those who don't respond to that initial vasoreactivity test, treatment often involves a multi-pronged approach using different classes of medications.
So it's not one drug fits all.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
PAH treatment is becoming increasingly sophisticated. It's about finding the right combination of therapies to target all those different aspects of the disease. Think of it like, adjusting the dials on a complex machine to get it running smoothly again.
And how do they even determine the right combination? Do they just pick a couple of things and hope for the best, or?
Not quite. Doctors assess the severity of your PAH, and they use something called the WHO functional class system.
Okay.
And think of it like levels in a video game. Level 1, you're living your life. Minimal limitations. And as the disease progresses, you might move up to, higher levels. Each one indicates how much PAH is impacting your activities.
Okay.
Treatment is tailored based on your specific level and how your body responds.
So based on your level and that test, they can tailor a treatment plan that takes into account all the unique aspects of what's going on.
Precisely.
Wow, that's fascinating. And this is just the beginning, right? We haven't even gotten into lifestyle modifications and things like that.
Exactly. We're going to get into all that.
Okay, I think we need to break this down a little bit further because we've covered a lot of ground already. Let's start by understanding these medications that are used to treat PAH. Okay, so we've established that PAH treatment is kind of like this puzzle, right?
Right.
Carefully selecting different medications to target different parts of the disease.
Yeah.
So let's actually talk about these puzzle pieces. What are these medications? How do they actually work?
Good question. So There are several different drug classes, each with their own, unique mechanism of action.
Right.
But let's just focus on a couple of examples, maybe just to illustrate this point. How about we start with endothelin receptor antagonists?
Endo what now?
I know.
These are some serious tongue twisters.
I know, right? Don't worry too much about the names for now. But basically, endothelin receptor antagonists, like bosentan, ambrisentan, they work by blocking a substance in your body called endothelin.
Okay.
And endothelin normally causes your blood vessels to constrict, tighten.
Okay.
So by blocking that, these medications can help those pulmonary arteries to just relax and widen, which helps improve the blood flow.
So it's like taking the brakes off those constricted blood vessels, allowing them to open up more.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. What's another one?
Okay, another class is PDE5 inhibitors. And these, you might recognize some of these names. Sildenafil, ditalofil.
Wait a minute. They have another life, don't they?
They do, yes.
Interesting.
So in the context of PAH, these PDE5 inhibitors work in a similar way, relaxing and widening those blood vessels in the lungs to improve that blood flow and reduce the strain on the heart.
Okay, so 2 different medications, same goal.
Exactly.
To improve that blood flow. So it seems like doctors have a lot of different options when it comes to treating PAH.
They do. And they often will use these medications in combination, tailoring that treatment plan to each patient's specific needs.
So it's not like just picking one from this column and one from this column.
No.
There's more to it.
It's much more dynamic than that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it starts with, a thorough assessment of your overall health, the severity of your PAH, any other medical conditions you might have, and then they carefully consider potential drug interactions.
Right.
And they'll adjust those dosages over time, monitoring your response kind of every step of the way.
So it's really this personalized approach, constantly fine-tuning, making adjustments along the way to try to get the best possible outcome.
Exactly. It's like finding the perfect recipe. You need to tweak those ingredients, get those proportions just right.
Yeah.
And like a good chef, a skilled medical team will work really closely with you, gathering that feedback and making those adjustments as needed.
So communication is key here.
Absolutely.
It's a partnership
It is.
between you and your healthcare provider
Absolutely.
to figure out what's going to work best for you.
Right. And don't hesitate to ask questions.
Right.
Share your experiences, voice any concerns you might have.
Yeah.
You're not just, passively receiving treatment. You're an active participant in this whole journey.
Exactly.
So now that we've talked about medications, why don't we switch gears for a moment? Let's talk about something that often gets, overlooked in the medical world.
What's that?
Lifestyle modifications.
Okay. I have to admit, I always get a little bit skeptical when we talk about lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
As if they can magically cure serious conditions. What's the deal with that? Can changing your diet or like hitting the gym actually make a difference when you're managing something as complex as PAH?
That's a great question. And I get the skepticism. Really, I do.
Yeah.
It's not about magical cures. It's more about empowering yourself to take an active role in managing your condition.
Right.
Think of it this way. Medications, those are like the foundation of a house, right? They provide that essential support. Lifestyle modifications, those are like the walls, the roof, all the other components that make that house a comfortable, livable space.
Okay, I like that analogy. So what are we talking about specifically here?
Well, for starters, regular exercise is key. And before you roll your eyes and think, easier said than done, hear me out.
Right.
We're not talking about becoming a marathon runner overnight.
Unless that's your thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Judgment.
The key is to find activities you actually enjoy and that fit within your own physical limitations, right? So start slowly, gradually increase the intensity, the duration, as your body adapts.
So that could be anything from gentle yoga to swimming to even just taking a walk in the park.
Precisely. And the benefits go beyond just physical fitness.
Yeah.
Right. We're talking boosting your mood, reducing stress, improving sleep, even enhancing the effectiveness of your medications.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this all ties together. It's like this whole holistic approach.
It is.
To managing PAH.
Yeah.
Not just about the medication.
Exactly. And speaking of which, another crucial aspect of this lifestyle management is diet.
Okay, what's the magic PAH diet?
I hate to disappoint, but there's no one-size-fits-all PAH diet. But there are some general guidelines that can make a big difference.
Okay.
Focus on nutrient-rich foods that really provide those building blocks for a healthy body.
So we're talking like Lots of fruits,
Right.
vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins,
Either way, yeah.
healthy fats.
Yep. So these foods provide those essential vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all those other nutrients that just support your overall well-being.
And I'm sensing like processed foods, sugary drinks, too much unhealthy fats, maybe those are not on the menu.
You got it. You're right, because those types of foods can contribute to inflammation, weight gain, other health issues that can make those PAH symptoms worse.
Yeah.
And it's not about depriving yourself.
Right.
It's about making, conscious choices to fuel your body.
Right. It's all about that balance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Allowing yourself to enjoy those treats in moderation, but
Right.
really focusing on a predominantly healthy diet.
You got it. And don't underestimate just the power of hydration.
Right.
Drinking plenty of water throughout the day is essential for everyone, but it's especially important when you have PAH.
Okay, so we've covered exercise, diet. What about stress? Because
Oh.
I know stress can be a killer,
Oh, damn.
even for people who don't have underlying conditions.
It can wreak havoc, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. Stress is a silent but really potent force that can worsen those PAH symptoms. So we're talking about things like fatigue, the shortness of breath, even chest pain. So finding those healthy ways to manage your stress is crucial for anyone, but especially important for people living with chronic illnesses like PAH.
So what are some effective stress-busting techniques that people can actually incorporate into their daily routine?
Well, the best approach is going to vary from person to person,
Right.
but some popular and effective options are things like mindfulness meditation,
Okay.
deep breathing exercises, yoga, tai chi, spending time in nature,
Yeah.
even listening to calming music, pursuing hobbies that bring you joy and relaxation.
Right. Finding those activities that help you unwind, de-stress.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of social connection.
Oh, yeah.
Talking to a friend, a family member, a therapist, maybe a support group. Sharing those experiences, knowing that you're not alone in this, can be incredibly empowering.
It's so important to have that support system, right?
It is.
People that you can talk to and that understand what you're going through.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, remember that managing a chronic illness like TAH is a marathon, not a sprint.
That's a good way to put it.
So it's about pacing yourself,
Right.
listening to your body, celebrating those small victories along the way.
And remembering that you are not defined by this diagnosis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You are so much more than your illness.
that.
You're this complex, wonderful individual with your own unique strengths, talents, passions, and those things can continue to shine brightly even in the face of these challenges.
Right. It's not letting PAH define you. It's about, living your life to the fullest and, embracing those things that you love and surrounding yourself with that supportive community.
Exactly. Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
So before we wrap things up, why don't we take a moment to just recap some of these key takeaways?
Sounds like a plan. Where do we even begin?
Okay, so we've journeyed through, the whole world of PAH, from understanding it to how it affects the lungs to how we treat it to how we live with it. We've covered a lot. Yeah.
We have covered a lot. So where do we even go from here?
Well, I think a good place to start would be, recapping some of the key points.
Okay, that's good.
We started by talking about those tiny arteries in your lungs and how they can become constricted, and the heart has to work really hard.
Right, it's like those highways we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
Traffic jams in your blood vessels.
Not good.
Not ideal, no. We also learned that diagnosing PAH requires a special approach, right?
It does, yeah.
It's not just a blood pressure check.
No, not at all.
Remember that tiny submarine analogy?
Yes.
Right, heart catheterization?
Yeah, that gives the doctors that direct insight into what's going on.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
speaking of treatment, it's not one size fits all.
Not at all, no.
We talked about how doctors can actually personalize these treatment plans using medication.
It's all about finding what works for you in your specific situation.
Exactly.
And I think it's really important for people to remember that you have a voice in this.
Right.
You and your doctor can work together to figure out that best plan for you.
Exactly. And don't forget about lifestyle.
Yes.
All those things that you can do, diet, exercise, stress management.
Huge, yeah. Those are essential parts of living well with PAH.
Yeah.
Not just add-ons.
It's all connected, right?
It is. It's all connected.
It's all about being an active participant in your own health journey.
Absolutely.
Working with your medical team. So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive here, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away?
I think it's just knowledge is power, And with the right information and the right support, you can navigate the challenges of PAH and live a really fulfilling life.
I love that. And if our listeners are feeling inspired to learn more,
Yes.
remember, this is just the start. We've just scratched the surface.
This is the tip of the iceberg, absolutely.
There's so much out there.
Research is constantly evolving. I'm really excited to see what the future holds for PAH treatment.
Same. So until next time, keep those brains engaged. Keep
Hey,
asking
everyone,
those
buckle up.
questions. Today we're diving
Keep
deep into
exploring.
proteins.
Those tiny but mighty molecules, they're the bedrock of life, you know.
Totally. And we're going beyond the basics today, talking about a Nobel Prize-winning discovery. This is set to completely change medicine as we know it, and so much more.
It's huge. This year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry, all about revolutionizing how we understand proteins. We're not just looking at them under a microscope anymore. We're designing them, predicting their every move with this, incredible accuracy.
Okay, so to break this down, we've got our hands on some exciting stuff. Excerpts from the actual Nobel Prize announcement, some really cool research on proteins and how they relate to neurodegenerative diseases.
Oh, and we've even got insights from a leading scientist in the field.
Exactly. Ready to get your mind blown.
Let's do this.
All right, so 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. It went to three incredible minds: David Baker, Demis Hassabis, and John Jumper. And their work, all about solving a challenge that's been puzzling scientists for ages, protein folding.
Okay, picture this. Proteins are like microscopic origami. They start as chains of amino acids. Think of them like beads on a string. But the thing is, these chains, they don't stay straight. They fold and they twist into these incredibly complex 3D shapes. And get this, those shapes, they determine what the protein actually does.
So proteins are like these tiny, perfectly folded machines. I think I'm getting it. But why is it so important to figure out how they fold? Why not just, let them do their thing?
You'd think it'd be that easy, right? But that's where it gets really wild. Each protein, it could theoretically fold into an almost impossible number of shapes. It's a number so huge, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
Oh, hold on. Information overload. Give me an idea. How many potential shapes are we talking about here? Say, for a smallish protein.
Okay, imagine a protein with just 100 amino acids. That's tiny in the protein world. This little guy could potentially fold into 147 different shapes. To put that into perspective, if this protein tried on a new shape every single second, it would take longer than the entire age of the universe to try them all.
Mind-blowing, right?
That's what's known as Levinthal's paradox.
Okay, my brain hurts just trying to imagine that. So, how in the world do scientists even begin to untangle how a protein folds with so many possibilities? It's like finding a specific grain of sand in the Sahara Desert.
Well, back in the 70s, there was this scientist, Christian Anfinsen. He made a huge breakthrough. He discovered that a protein's amino acid sequence, that string of beads we talked about, it actually holds the instructions for how it'll fold. It's like a secret code hidden within the protein itself.
So, if we know the amino acid sequence, we should be able to, predict the shape, crack the code?
That was the idea. And early on, that's exactly what scientists tried to do. They used their knowledge about the different amino acids, their properties, and tried to come up with some basic rules for predicting how the protein would fold.
So, if you see amino acid A next to amino acid B, boom, you know it'll fold a specific way.
Exactly. Those early attempts were a good starting point. But there was a problem. They could only predict tiny bits of the protein structure, not the whole intricate 3D shape.
Okay, so they could maybe figure out a spiral staircase in our protein mansion, but not the whole floor plan.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And if you're missing that complete picture, you can't fully grasp how that protein works, how it interacts with other molecules in the body. And that's where things get really interesting with David Baker and his research into computational protein design.
Let's dive into that. How did Baker change the game?
Well, instead of just using those simple rules, he brought in the big guns, computers. His team created this groundbreaking software called Rosetta. It was a total game changer.
Rosetta, like the Rosetta Stone that helped us understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Exactly. Just like the Rosetta Stone unlocked the secrets of those ancient writings, Baker's software opened up this whole new world of protein understanding. Rosetta uses these sophisticated algorithms, basically like a superpowered puzzle solver, to piece together protein structures.
So it's like having this giant library of protein building blocks, and Rosetta can just try out different combinations, see what fits until it finds the most stable structure.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really mind-blowing. Baker and his team didn't stop at just predicting existing structures. They actually designed a protein completely from scratch, a brand new structure, something never seen in nature before.
Hold on, they created a protein that had never existed. That's amazing. Tell me more.
It was called Top 7, and let me tell you, it turned heads. This breakthrough back in 2003 showed that we weren't stuck just copying nature anymore. We could design proteins to do specific things, and that opened up a whole universe of possibilities.
Okay, so we've gone from understanding how proteins fold to basically creating them on demand. This is where those real-world applications start to come in, right?
Yeah.
What can we actually do with this?
The possibilities are, well, almost limitless. Imagine designing proteins to deliver drugs with pinpoint accuracy, or creating brand new therapies for diseases we thought were untreatable. We could even develop entirely new types of biomaterials.
This is starting to sound like something out of a sci-fi movie. But we've got to talk about the other half of this Nobel Prize, predicting protein structures using artificial intelligence. And that's exactly what we'll do right after this quick break. So we've talked about how scientists, like David Baker, are actually building new proteins from the ground up. But this Nobel Prize, it also recognized this other groundbreaking achievement, predicting protein structure. It's like we're deciphering the language of life itself, you know? Where do we even start?
Right. We touched on how those early attempts at predicting structure, they had their limits. It's like those scientists only had a few pieces of a massive puzzle.
Right.
And that's when they created this competition called CASP.
CASP.
Yeah, the Critical Assessment of Protein Structure Prediction. They wanted to shake things up, really push the field forward.
A competition, huh? So like the Olympics of protein prediction.
Exactly. Researchers from all over the world, they'd submit their predictions for how a specific protein would fold. And get this, they wouldn't even know the real structure beforehand. It was the ultimate test.
Okay, so how'd it go? Anyone crack the code?
For a long time.
Yeah.
Even the best predictions, they were only getting about 40% of the structure right. But then, something major changed the game. Artificial intelligence.
AI, how'd that get involved?
This is where our other Nobel Prize winners, Demis and John Jumper, they were DeepMind. They're known for being on the cutting edge of AI. And they developed this program, AlphaFold.
AlphaFold. Sounds intense. What made it so different?
Okay, imagine this. You're trying to teach a computer to recognize, like, different breeds of dogs. You show it tons of pictures of dogs, right? AlphaFold. It's kind of similar. These researchers, they trained it on this huge database of protein structures, let it learn all the patterns, the rules, all the things that govern how proteins fold.
So instead of having lines of code telling it how a protein should fold, it learned from actually seeing the data.
You got it. And that's where it gets really powerful. It can see these subtle connections, these relationships between amino acids that are really hard to capture with those more traditional methods.
Okay, so how'd it do in this CASP competition?
Well, the first version, AlphaFold 1, it was already a huge improvement. But then came AlphaFold 2.
AlphaFold 2.
And it just blew everything else out of the water.
What was different about AlphaFold 2?
It used this even more advanced type of AI. It was amazing at understanding these long-range interactions within the protein.
Long range?
Yeah, because sometimes you have amino acids that are far apart in the sequence, but they end up super close together in that final folded structure.
So it's like it can see those connections across the entire protein, not just what's right next to each other.
Exactly. And the results, amazing.
Yeah.
AlphaFold 2 was as accurate as experimental methods, the kind that take tons of work in the lab.
Wow. So are you saying that instead of months or even years of research, you could potentially predict a protein structure in like a few hours, maybe even less, using AlphaFold?
You got it. Complete game changer. And to make it even better, DeepMind, they made all of AlphaFold's predictions free for any researcher in the world to use.
Wow.
It's this massive database of protein structures. Like, imagine a Google Maps, but for the human body.
That's incredible. But earlier, you mentioned research on proteins and their link to neurodegenerative diseases. How does that all tie in?
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah.
It brings us to this molecule, cardiolipin, that hangs out in the mitochondria.
The powerhouses of our cells.
Exactly. And cardiolipin, it's crucial for those mitochondria to do their job. And some research suggests that when its structure gets messed up, it could be linked to diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Okay, so this is where it all comes together. Protein science and real-world health issues. How do we use all this new knowledge to actually develop new treatments?
The million-dollar question. And that's what makes this ability to design and understand proteins so precisely so exciting. Imagine designing a protein-based therapy that could zero in on damaged cardiolipin in the brain and fix it.
So like a microscopic repair crew.
Precisely. This is still a very active area of research. But the potential, it's huge. But of course, with this new power, we've got some new questions, new challenges to think about.
You're talking about the ethics of it all, right? If we can design and control proteins, where do we draw the line?
Exactly. And that's a conversation we definitely need to have.
So we've spent all this time talking about the incredible potential of designing and predicting proteins. But like any powerful new tool, we need to stop and think about the implications. It's like we've been given this amazing toolkit, and now it's up to us to figure out how to use it responsibly.
It really is like opening Pandora's box, isn't it? We've unlocked these amazing secrets about what makes life tick at its most basic level.
Okay.
But with that knowledge comes a huge responsibility.
So what are some of the concerns? What should we be keeping in mind as this technology keeps advancing?
Well, one big one is the potential for misuse, right? Someone could use this knowledge to design harmful proteins. Imagine a protein engineered to be toxic or to disrupt how our cells work.
Okay, yeah. That's a scary thought. Like something out of a sci-fi movie where a well-intentioned experiment goes totally off the rails. Are there other concerns too?
Absolutely. Even if everyone's intentions are good, we have to think about unintended consequences. We might design a protein to do a specific job, but it could have unexpected effects on other parts of the body.
So it's like introducing a new species into an ecosystem. You think it'll be good, but then you get these ripple effects that are impossible to predict.
Exactly. And we haven't even touched on the ethical dilemmas. What happens when we can design proteins that enhance what humans can do? Will everyone have access to those enhancements, or will it create a world where only the privileged benefit?
It's like those debates about gene editing, but taken to a whole other level. It sounds like we need to be having these discussions now before this technology gets even more advanced.
100% agree. We need everyone at the table. Ethicists, policymakers, the public. We've got to talk about this, make sure that we're using this technology ethically for the good of everyone.
And you mentioned a really promising approach that actually targets a specific protein in the mitochondria. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Definitely. We were talking about cardiolipin, right? That really important mitochondrial lipid that seems to be linked to neurodegenerative diseases when it's not working properly. Well, scientists are looking into these molecules called SS peptides, especially one called SS31, and they've been seeing some really promising effects.
Remind me, what's so important about cardiolipin again?
Remember, cardiolipin, it helps the mitochondria, those powerhouses in our cells, function the way they should. And SS31, it basically acts like a bodyguard for cardiolipin, protects it from damage.
So it's like a shield stopping those bad changes to the cardiolipin structure that we talked about.
Perfect way to put it. And when you protect cardiolipin, you help the mitochondria work better. And that could be huge for treating all kinds of diseases, including those neurodegenerative diseases we've been discussing.
That's incredible. So even while we're trying to figure out the ethical side of all of this, we're already seeing how it could lead to life-saving treatments. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. It shows you the immense power we're dealing with,
Yeah.
but also the huge responsibility that comes with these scientific discoveries.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what are the key things you want our listeners to remember?
Well, the biggest one is just how amazing this achievement is, the fact that we can design and predict proteins like this. We're not just watching the microscopic world anymore, we're actually shaping it. It's mind-blowing when you really think about it.
And it's opening up so many doors in medicine, biotechnology, you name it. But as we've been saying, that power comes with responsibility.
For sure. It's up to every single one of us to make sure that this technology is used ethically, that it makes the world a better place.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this. If we can design proteins with this kind of incredible precision now, what are the limits? Could we design proteins that do things we've never even imagined? The possibilities seem endless, and it's a future we're all a part of shaping.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's an exciting time to be following all of this, that's for sure. I can't wait to see what the future holds.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the incredible world of proteins. We hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned a thing or two along the way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
Thanks for listening. We're glad you were able to tune into this podcast. Once again, this is The New Chemist, where we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as the other sciences, careers, community, research, and COVID-19. Thanks again for listening. Note, the views on this podcast represent those of my guests and I.